Chapter 997. Worldly Star City was a city with such a beautiful name. Usually, when people heard about it for the first time, they would think of a world that looked like a galaxy. But in truth, this place was barren. The so-called city was just an oasis in the desert, a place where tents could be found everywhere. This was Worldly Star City during the day. The desert stretched as far as the eye could see, and the oases that dotted the ground gave the place a hint of life. Quite a number of cultivators could be seen either meditating in the desert or moving between the tents. This place did not look like a city, but more like a gigantic and messy market. The scorching sun shone its heat on the ground, causing even the sand on the ground to be scorching hot. Even though this place stretched as far as the eye could see, if one looked at it for a prolonged period of time, they would inevitably feel irritated. Because of that, Worldly Star City during the day was often referred to as the City of Annoyance. However, at night, everything in this place would be like a mirage. It would be completely reversed, and the change would be so great that it would cause the hearts of all those who saw it for the first time to waver. At night, the stars shone brilliantly. After the sand on the ground had been scorched for an entire day, it looked as if it had melted and turned into large stones that were placed side by side on the ground in a very orderly manner. There was also a layer of seemingly illusory blue screen that spread across the ground, causing those who stood there to feel a cool sensation under their feet, as if they were stepping on clear water. The tents shone with a quiet light, as if they were reflecting the starry sky. They turned into solid objects that were shaped like corners. Pillars of light rose into the air from their tips, and there were as many pillars of light as there were tents in the area. The pillars of light seemed to be connected to the sky. As they intersected with each other, silver rivers appeared and connected each of the pillars, connecting the sky and the earth. They even turned into paths of the silver rivers that intersected with the illusory palaces that appeared in the sky during the night. The countless palaces seemed illusory, but they were incredibly real. Even if someone walked up to them, touched them with their right hand, or sensed them with their divine sense, they would find that they existed. When night fell in the seemingly endless desert, walls would appear out of nowhere and surround the place, as if it had turned into a city of emperors in the mortal world. If one looked down from the sky, the rivers of stars and palaces actually formed a very beautiful scene. This scene was like the starry sky, beautiful beyond compare. It was just like looking at the sky from the ground. Within that peerless scene, the Worldly Star City, which existed together with the Worldly Star City, was formed. Worldly Star City was extremely lively at night. There were many cultivators coming and going, and it was even more prosperous than Blackwater City. Especially with the black ink auction around the corner, the number of cultivators in the city had increased significantly. Su Ming walked in the crowd, and Yu Rou followed behind him with her veil covering her face. Her expression remained aloof all along the way, and the murderous look in her eyes was incredibly thick. Every single time she thought of the big yellow dog changing into her appearance to marry someone, she, who had always been elegant, would be unable to help herself from going mad. If Su Ming was not here, she would have spread her divine since a long time ago and immediately searched for the two dogs at all costs. Have you heard? The black and crane double ghosts have appeared again. As the two of them moved forward, Su Ming's expression suddenly changed. He turned his head around and looked into the distance. There was an inn over there, and there was a loud commotion within it. There were 3 cultivators at one of the tables, and they were talking to each other with angry expressions on their faces. Damn it! Are you talking about that yellow dog and that woman who calls herself Grandpa Crane? That's right. Who else could it be besides them? That woman who calls herself Grandpa Crane is definitely neither a man nor a woman, or else how could she call herself Grandpa Crane? She brought that despicable yellow dog with her in the past, and she made dozens of small families fly into a rage because of it. Brother Wong, I remember that you also joined the search for a son-in-law in the past, right? Don't mention that. That woman and I are absolutely irreconcilable enemies. But honestly speaking, that woman is indeed incredibly beautiful. I've seen her once, Or else, she wouldn't have been able to make the direct descendants of those dozens of families go mad for her. It said that there are even a few who would do anything to become her guest. Oomph. Your information is outdated. From what I know, there are already quite a few people who have become her guest, and after that, they fell head over heels for her, or else how could the black and crane double ghost have managed to take away so many crystals? I've seen that woman before as well. She's truly an incredibly beautiful person. Why would such a beautiful woman need to do this? She could have gone to any middle-sized family, and she would have been taken in. In fact, even the strongest families would pay attention to such a beautiful woman. If she practiced charm arts, then she would definitely be incredibly powerful. As Su Ming listened, a strange expression immediately appeared on his face. He cast a sideways glance at Yuro. At that moment, Yuro was so angry that she was trembling. The murderous aura in her eyes had already reached its peak, and even the area around her had instantly turned cold. She took a swift step forward and turned into a wisp of green smoke that appeared in the inn. Su Ming smiled wryly, but did not stop her. He watched as Yuro stepped into the inn. At the instant she did so, the inn instantly turned cold, causing her to instantly attract all the people's attention. When these people saw the veiled Yuro, they were immediately stunned, but soon after, some of their expressions changed drastically. In fact, some of them even stood up swiftly and with slight uncertainty on their faces. They glared at Yuro. It was especially so for the three people who had been discussing the matter just now. They were staring at Yuro, and their expressions slowly twisted. A monstrous wave of hatred rose swiftly within them, but they were suppressed and turned into a hint of hesitation. When Yuro saw the expressions of the people around her, her heart immediately turned cold. The hint of hope that she still had in her heart disappeared by then, but she was still slightly unwilling to admit defeat. That was why she decided to lift her veil right before the people's faces. She revealed her incredibly beautiful face. At the instant her veil was lifted and everyone saw Yuro's face. Enraged roars swiftly rose from the inn like storm. The black and crane double ghosts. It's the black and crane double ghosts. Damn it. How dare you appear in this place? Give me back my crystals. My crystals. I was going to buy my enchanted treasures with them. Why you? I'll fight you to the death. Crazed voices reverberated in the air, and quite a large number of cultivators had already rushed out. The murderous aura in Yuro's eyes instantly became incredibly strong. She no longer had a single shred of doubt that the damn yellow dog was indeed her. In fact, even the waiter of the inn had his eyes bloodshot. He had brought out an axe from somewhere and charged toward Yuro while growling. Damn it, it's you. You're the one who cheated me of my crystals. When she saw that the cultivators had already rushed towards her, Yuro lifted her hand and swung it outwards. Immediately, all the cultivators in the inn froze and fell backwards. Banging sounds reverberated in the air, and all the cultivators coughed up blood as they fell backwards. This was because Yuro had already suppressed her killing intent. With a cold harumph, she turned around and took a step out of the inn before disappearing without a trace. In fact, she did not even bother about Su Ming anymore. Instead, once she walked out of the inn, she immediately spread her divine sense outwards and swept through Worldly Star Planet in search of the two dogs that she hated so much that she could not wait to kill them. Su Ming smiled wryly and shook his head. He watched as Yuro's divine sense swept through the area for a moment before she turned into a long arc and charged into the distance with a monstrous, murderous aura. He sighed in his heart and followed after her. In a corner of Worldly Star Planet was an old man with a sanctimonious appearance. As he stroked his beard, he looked at the two middle-aged men before him with a grin. Ahem, my fellow Taoists. I can only let you see the first 3 pages of this tome. If you want to take all of them, you'll need 500 crystals, the old man said slowly in a relaxed manner. The old man said slowly and calmly. Underneath his feet, there was a big yellow dog lying on the ground, glaring fiercely at the two middle-aged men. From time to time, it would let out a threatening growl, as if it wanted to rush out and tear the two men into pieces. Every time when it was at its most ferocious, the old man would give it a kick, and the big yellow dog would immediately become less aggressive. After a moment, the two middle-aged men left with the tome. The old man counted the crystals once again, and a smug expression appeared on his face as he lowered his head and spoke to the big yellow dog. How many times have I told you? When you should be fierce, you should be fierce. And when you shouldn't be fierce, you must be gentle. Why you? Oh well, I'll take 3/10 of your profit this time. How dare you? The big yellow dog immediately stood up like a human and glared at the old man fiercely. The old man quickly plastered a smile on his face and went up to hug the big yellow dog. Haha, we're brothers. Don't bite me. We're brothers, all right? Brothers. We're brothers, all right? We're brothers, all right? I won't deduct anything, all right? Once the old man put his arm around the big yellow dog's shoulder, a thick, vulgar air immediately spread out from him. I'm telling you, we have to occasionally reveal our identities as the dual fiends, the crane and the black. Only then will we be able to continue being famous. This identity is great. You should know that the more famous we are, the more of a commotion we'll cause when we come out of the mountain in the future. The old man chuckled softly and walked into the distance with the big yellow dog. Yet right after they took a few steps, the old man suddenly shuddered and quickly cast a sideways glance at the big yellow dog. When he saw that the big yellow dog's expression remained the same, the old man's eyes immediately darted around. Its cultivation base has been severely damaged. It's only right that it can't sense it now. Ahem, big brother abyss dragon. The old man immediately lowered his body, looking as if he was treating the big yellow dog as his superior. This scene caused the big yellow dog to be stunned. Honestly, I've always had a question. Big brother abyss dragon, on account of how diligent I've been over the past 3 years, please tell me. The old man lowered his body, and with an obsequious look on his face, he started begging in a submissive tone. Before the big yellow dog could speak, he immediately continued speaking. Why did you force me to turn into the beautiful, gentle, kind, and incomparable big sister Uro? The lovely big sister Uro who I respected from the depths of my heart, and even thought was more brilliant than Su Ming. You have to know that this is something I've been feeling guilty about for the past 3 years. It's something that even hurts me. I didn't want to become her, but you. Why did you force me to become her? As the old man spoke, he crouched down and hugged his head as he cried. The big yellow dog was completely stunned. At that moment, the remote place was suddenly enveloped by a wave of cold. In that cold, a voice that sounded like a mountain about to explode traveled into the air. The dual fiends, the crane and the black. Recently, I've been sleeping at 9:30 p.m. sharp and waking up at 7 a.m. sharp. Once I send my child to kindergarten, I'll immediately start writing. I feel that my life has become slightly more normal. Now, I'll write the second chapter. My fellow Taoists, give me your monthly votes and don't forget your recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 998. The bald crane shuddered, and its cries became even more wretched. As it cried, it also howled loudly. Big brother abyss dragon, why you? You've always known that I've been in a lot of pain during the past 3 years. I feel like I've let big sister Uro down, but why did you force me in the past? I know that your master is Yu Xian, and Yu Xian has an unclear relationship with Su Ming, which is why you find big sister Uro an eyesore. With this goal in mind, you forced the pitiful me to listen to you, but I don't want to do this. I remember now. You've also turned into big sister Uro's appearance. If the big yellow dog still did not understand what was going on, then it would have lived all these years in vain. It might be heavily injured and might not be as cunning and intelligent as the bald crane, but there was no way it would not understand that the damn bald crane wanted to push all the blame onto it. The cold and sinister voice was still echoing in the air, and a woman's figure was walking towards it with a monstrous, murderous aura. She was closing in on it with each step she took. You damn bald crane. The big yellow dog roared furiously and kicked the bald crane. It let out a shrill scream of pain and fell backwards. It coughed up a huge mouthful of blood, and when it fell to the ground, it struggled a few times as if it was about to die. With great difficulty, it turned its head around and looked at the woman walking towards it. "Big sister, you, Ro, I'm sorry to you." Once it finished speaking, its eyes rolled back and it stopped moving. "I'll fight you to the death." The big yellow dog's face was filled with grief. As if he had gone mad, his body changed and turned into a much smaller abyss dragon. However, there were countless wounds on his body, and he did not even have dragon tendons, causing him to exude a miserable air once he turned into an abyss dragon. In fact, some of the wounds on his body tore open due to his agitation, and blood spilled out. This appearance was enough to make anyone's expression change. It charged towards you, Ro, but when it was in midair, it started laughing brokenly. The wounds on its body coughed up blood at the same time, causing it to fall from midair. When it fell to the ground, it coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. "Master, before you fell asleep, you told me to run for my life. You told me not to turn into an abyss dragon again, because my injuries were too severe. Once I turned into an abyss dragon, I would definitely die. I listened to you and turned into a big yellow dog. But now, since I cannot avoid death, I will die with the body of an abyss dragon. Even if I die, I will still be an abyss dragon." In bitterness, the abyss dragon shuddered, and an aura of death instantly filled its entire body. In fact, even its body was swiftly rotting away. It closed its eyes and died. This scene caused Ro's footsteps to come to a halt, even though she was burning with rage and murderous aura to kill them. She was stunned and stared at the bald crane and the abyss dragon in a daze. The scene was completely out of her expectations. She did not expect such an ending. She could not even tell who it was that had transformed into her. She had heard that the big yellow dog was good at transformation, but now it seemed to be very honest. With her level of cultivation, she could tell with just one glance that the abyss dragon had truly died. Its body and soul had been destroyed, and it had died because its injuries were too severe. After it turned into an abyss dragon, it could no longer bear the burden and died. This was real. It was not fake. The thick aura of death and the rotting of its body caused Ro's mind to go slightly blank. She looked at the bald crane in a daze. The bald crane's death had become even more complete. The bald crane's words before it died could not help but echo in her ears. The words were filled with incomparable sincerity and remorse, and all of this caused Ro to feel slightly dazed. The abyss dragon's death and its request for death with its dignity suddenly caused Ro to be slightly envious of the abyss dragon's master. How? How could this be? Ro had come with anger and murderous aura, but now her emotions had turned into complicated ones. In silence, she stood there for a long time until she sighed and turned around to leave. After she left, the abyss dragon and the bald crane's corpses continued rotting away. It was as if an endless amount of time had passed twice as fast on their bodies during the moment they died. Su Ming walked out of the darkness and stood beside the bald crane and the abyss dragon's corpses before he sighed. Ro might have extraordinary power and might have lived for a long time, but her experiences could not compare to Su Ming's. The twists and turns she had gone through in her life could not compare to Su Ming's either. Besides, she did not understand the bald crane. However, Su Ming's understanding towards the bald crane had already reached deep into its bones. He looked at the two corpses on the ground and shook his head. Their acting this time is pretty realistic. Su Ming smiled wryly, then turned around and left. At the same time, in another corner of Worldly Star City were two middle-aged men. They wore bamboo hats and long robes, and they were taking a stroll through the city with large strides. If anyone could see their faces under the bamboo hats, then they would see that one of them was filled with obscenity, while the other had an incredibly awe-inspiring air. However, there was also a hint of obscenity in the depths of that awe-inspiring air. Haha, isn't Grandpa Crane awesome? You're awesome. Am I awesome? You're awesome. Haha, that last Ro would never have guessed that when we pretended to be her in the past, we already thought about this day. Haha, confusing and confusing. Grandpa Crane's plan is called confusing and confusing. Bosley Long has 3 scales. One of them can hide our presence so that no one can discover us, and the other 2 can turn into our clones. Unless someone's level of cultivation surpasses Bosley Long's, then there's no way they'll be able to discover us. Heh, I'm smart, aren't I? Let me tell you, we had to occasionally reveal our identities as the dual fiends of the crane and the black because of this day. See, we've solved the problem now, haven't we? But Baldy, I've always wanted to ask you, why are you called the dual fiends of the crane and the black? It should be the dual fiends of the crane and the yellow, right? Ahem, let's not talk about this for now. Xiao Huang, your reaction just now was a little slow. While I called you Big Brother Abyss Dragon just now, you were stunned for a moment. Even though you should be stunned based on our rehearsal, you were stunned for too long. It was too fake. Also, I remember that your last sentence about fighting against her wasn't in our rehearsal. Why you? Do you know that adding lines at the last minute is very dangerous? Oh well, based on our agreement in the past, I'll help you discredit her, and you'll have to cooperate with me. All the crystals will belong to me, and you promise me that the treasures you hid in the Emperor of Abyss True World will also belong to me. These 2 men were naturally the Bald Crane and the Abyss Dragon. The Bald Crane's transformation art was enough to allow the Abyss Dragon to change into all sorts of forms. At that moment, as they mumbled to each other, they slowly left into the distance. However, in their excitement, they did not notice that Su Ming was watching them in the dark with a wry smile on his face. The Bald Crane and the Abyss Dragon left into the distance. With a complicated look on her face, Yuro also left the place. No one knew where she went. At that moment, Su Ming was the only one left by his side, along with the Duke of Crimson Flame, who had turned into the totem on his arm. Shaking his head, Su Ming turned around and walked through the Silver River in Worldly Star Planet. His footsteps were not fast, and he walked forward leisurely. Occasionally, cultivators would pass by him on the way, and there would always be a few among them who would lower their heads when they saw him, putting on barely noticeable expressions of respect. Some of these people were from the Lai Shan family, and some were from the other affiliated berserkers. They might not know Su Ming, but they could sense the indistinct, mighty pressure he exuded towards the berserkers. Also, Su Ming's status caused the Lai Shan family and the other affiliated berserkers to protect him in secret no matter where he went in Black Ink Planet. These people existed in every corner of Worldly Star Planet. In fact, the Hua family in Worldly Star Planet was also under strict surveillance. They had also obtained some clues, and their progenitor had come out of isolation due to alarm. He had personally given an order to the entire family to forbid them from going out. He had also ordered the powerful warriors in the family to be constantly on guard, and told all the guests who came to the Hua family were not allowed to go out that night. The Tai Ci family had learned from their mistakes. They did not want to provoke people they should not provoke or offend people they should not offend because of any accident. After the time it takes for 2 incense sticks to burn, a man walked towards Su Ming. That man stopped for a moment beside Su Ming, then respectfully handed him a jade slip. There was a hint of fanaticism in his eyes, and he was just about to take his leave. "I like silence," Su Ming said flatly before the man left. The man immediately voiced his obedience and left respectfully. Su Ming cast his gaze on the jade slip. Yuan's current location was marked on the jade slip. He cast a glance at it. Then once he crushed it, he walked slowly towards the place. Gradually, the number of cultivators before him decreased, and in the end, there were no longer any cultivators in all the Silver River paths that he had taken. Compared to the other Silver River paths, which were bustling with activity, Su Ming's path was incredibly quiet. However, no one paid any attention to this place, because if someone did, then someone would immediately move forward in the dark to monitor them. However, Su Ming did not bother himself with this. He liked silence, and that was why the Lai Shan family gave him silence. Su Ming walked for an hour, but he was not in a hurry. He continued walking until a tower appeared before him. This was originally an inn used by cultivators, and each room had its own rune and a sufficient amount of spiritual aura. At this moment, this place should have been very lively, but right then, the inn was completely silent. Not a single soul could be seen in the hall. In fact, almost all of the nearly 100 rooms that were originally filled with people were empty. Only one room belonged to Yi Wang. The silence around Su Ming formed a stark contrast with the lively sounds coming from the distance. With a calm expression on his face, Su Ming approached the inn's door and walked up the stairs. He arrived at the end of the third floor, right in front of a room. Su Ming lifted his hand and placed it on the door, then knocked lightly a few times. Thud, thud, thud. Sir, you've sent away all the cultivators in this place, so that not a single sound can be heard within a circular area of 100 lis. For you to be able to make the lively worldly Star City become so quiet and empty when Black Ink auction is about to begin. If you have such status and power, why would you need to knock on my door when you've come to my room? A cold voice said from within the room. There was not a hint of emotion in that voice. How could I enter my old friend's room without being invited? Su Ming smiled faintly and said flatly. Once Su Ming's words left his mouth, the room immediately fell silent. After some time, the door before him opened without a single sound, and a gaze filled with complicated emotions and disbelief fell on Su Ming from the table in the room. It's been a long time. The second chapter has been delivered. There are only a dozen-something monthly votes left. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 999. These words were not spoken by Su Ming, but by a young man in white who was sitting by the table when the door to the room opened without a sound. And those words fell from the mouth of a young man in white who was sitting by the table. The young man was rather handsome. He had dashing eyebrows and bright eyes. There was an air of aloofness that seemed to come from his bones, and it lingered around him. It was just like when Su Ming first met Yi Wang in the past. There was a hint of arrogance in his loneliness, and he was still the same. He was like a sharp sword that was about to be drawn out of its scabbard. He was in a balance between showing off his brilliance and keeping it hidden. This presence was enough to make any cultivator who saw Yi Wang to involuntarily pay attention to him and stare at him. This was Yi Wang, the prodigy with the greatest potential in tens of thousands of years in the land of immortals. He was also highly regarded by Morning Dao sect, and the sect elder had even personally taken him in as a successor disciple. He was the pride of the immortals. Just like himself, he lived his entire life in pride and loneliness. He was proud because he was alone, and he was lonely because his light was too bright, and there was no one around him who could compare to him. In Yi Wang's heart, the only thing he remembered from all his experiences in his life was the boy he saw in the land of berserkers after he joined the clan. That was the first time Yi Wang had fought to a draw with someone. In fact, it could even be said that he had already failed at that time. With his pride, there was only one thing in life besides failure and victory. There was no such thing as a draw. When he saw Su Ming again in the barren lands of divine essence, he did not tell anyone else about him. This was a secret kept at the bottom of his heart. In fact, when Su Ming was forced into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land, he had gone there and watched it quietly for a long time. There was no enmity between him and Su Ming, but there was a resolve in his heart. This resolve was due to his pride, which was why he wanted to kill Su Ming with his own hands and wipe off the only time he had ever fought to a draw with someone of the same generation. This resolve was also due to his loneliness. In his lonely and monotonous life, he believed that there was only one person who had the right to be his friend. However, he did not understand much about the word friend. Long time no see. He walked into the room and sat down across from Yi Wang. There was a table between them, and there was wine on the table. It was the taste of wine that Yi Wang had tasted when he was alone. Su Ming looked at Yi Wang. In his memories, this person was the center of attention. No matter where he was, he seemed to be used to being the center of attention. It did not matter whether it was his level of cultivation, his potential, or his appearance. He looked as if he was doted on by the universe. This was something that was very similar to Dao Kong. However, the difference between them was that one was cold, while the other was sinister. Su Ming picked up the wine pot and poured wine for himself and Yi Wang. He lifted the wine cup gently and looked at Yi Wang. Yi Wang was silent. The complicated look on his face still did not disappear. He looked at Su Ming, and after a long while, he also picked up his wine cup. This cup of wine is for the first time we met in the Berserker tribe. Su Ming finished the wine in one gulp. Yuan quietly finished the wine in one gulp and placed it by the side. The complicated look in his eyes grew stronger as he looked at Su Ming and did not speak for a long time. Su Ming did not speak either. The two of them just sat quietly in the room. It was quiet all around them. Not a single sound came from outside. It was as if this region had been wiped off from Worldly Star Planet. After the time it takes for 2 incense sticks to burn, Yi Wang sighed softly. You've changed a lot. The first time we met, you didn't know about the cause and effect, and the second time we met, you were already in the barren lands of divine essence. You've also changed a lot. Right now, you're already in the middle stage of World Plane Realm, and by the looks of it, you'll only need 1,000 years to reach completion in the middle stage of World Plane Realm. An ancient look that even he did not notice slowly appeared on Su Ming's face. Yi Wang's level of cultivation was at the middle stage of World Plane Realm. This sort of level of cultivation could be said to be a complete display of his potential. Yi Wang had not practiced cultivation for a long time, and he was not old either, but he had managed to reach the middle stage of World Plane Realm with his own power. This was something that Su Ming could not compare to. If Su Ming did not have his Akang clone, if he did not have his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, and if Su Ming was not an abyss builder, then he might not even have the right to sit down before Yi Wang. After all, Su Ming's true level of cultivation was only at the peak of Heaven Cultivation Realm. Even if he had worked much harder than Yi Wang, even if his experiences were much more torturous than Yi Wang's, even if the price he had to pay far surpassed Yi Wang's, even if Yi Wang's path had always been smooth sailing, there were times when potential was something that could not be erased no matter how much sweat and effort one put into it. Not bad, huh? Compared to you, my speed of cultivation is still too slow. Yi Wang picked up the pot of wine. Once he poured wine for Su Ming and himself, he drank it all in one gulp again. I've always thought that the world is fair. The weak should be weak. No matter how much they train, they can't become powerful, and the powerful should be powerful and continue walking to the peak. This is the structure of the world, I understand. Your potential is very ordinary, but you walked ahead of me. Is this what they mean by the saying, the clumsy bird flies early? Yi Wang drank another cup of wine. His final sentence showed his proud and aloof personality that made him stand out from other people. There was even a hint of provocation in his words. Su Ming smiled faintly, picked up the wine cup, and drank from it. A profound look appeared in his eyes. The clumsy bird flies early is a huge lie and a joke, because there are far too many ordinary people in this world. We need comfort and motivation. That is a beautiful thing that makes people want to immerse themselves in it and be unable to free themselves from it. I am indeed a clumsy bird. I don't have your breathtaking attention. This is unfair, Su Ming said flatly after he put down the wine cup. Yi Wang fell silent. A contemplative look appeared in his eyes. After a long while, he cast his gaze outside the window. You have indeed walked ahead of me. This has nothing to do with whether it's fair or not, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about this so-called fairness in the universe. Yi Wang shook his head. His gaze fell on Su Ming's face once again, and it was as if there was a spark in his eyes. His thoughts ran deep. Since his level of cultivation was not as high as Su Ming's, then perhaps he could open up a gap in Su Ming's heart. A mistake in his epiphany, and epiphany would usually cause a person's level of cultivation to stop moving forward endlessly. This gap would require him to find the weakness in the other person's heart through their words, and from there, he could magnify it. This was a divine ability from Morning Dao sect, and Yi Wang had seen it before. Su Ming thought about it, then looked at the empty wine cup before he said calmly, Someone once asked me this question. He asked me why the others were unfair to him. This world has always been unfair. Those who want to pursue fairness will only end up in a tragic end. Oh, then why do people still have to look forward to a beautiful future? A glint appeared in Yi Wang's eyes. Su Ming's words caused him to think about it, and he found that there was a deeper meaning to them. This beautiful lie must exist, because even if people spend their entire lives searching for it without any results, they are still searching for it. As long as they continue searching for it, then there will be a slight possibility that they can turn something rotten into something magical. Because as long as they continue searching for it, then there will be a possibility that they will discover an area in which they are stronger than others. Even if my potential in cultivation is not good, perhaps I will be better than others when it comes to dealing with people. Even if I'm not good when it comes to dealing with people, perhaps I will have my own forte when it comes to creating things. There will always be a place that is suitable for me. There will always be a forte that makes me slightly better than others. Based on this, even the heavens are fair. Su Ming stared at the wine cup and remembered his status as an abyss builder along with his inborn ability to possess clones. He was a stupid bird, but if he did not have that beautiful future and the desire to pursue something that made him unwilling to accept his current situation, then he would not have been able to find his forte on the path of his pursuit. What are you trying to say? Yi Wang was silent. After some time, he lifted his head and looked at Su Ming. He did not find a single flaw in Su Ming's heart through his words. Instead, he had a feeling that he had been lured into Su Ming's thoughts. What was the plan against me that you participated in true Morning Dao world? Su Ming asked calmly with a smile. You want to know? Yi Wang said faintly. That is my answer as well. Su Ming smiled. A focused glint appeared in Yi Wang's eyes. He looked at Su Ming, and a pensive look gradually appeared on his face. I'll tell you a story. I saw it in a person's memories. In a secular world, there was a rich man who wanted to build a house, so he found a carpenter. The rich man looked down on the carpenter because he had a lot of servants and could decide the carpenter's fate at will. He believed that the carpenter was a lowly person. The carpenter was honest, so he was used to being looked down upon and spoken to by others. He quietly helped the rich man build his house, but when he finished, he kept the sharp edges of the wooden tools in the house based on his knowledge. He also built a lot of door sills on the ground, making the house look incredibly grand. It did not matter whether it was the feng shui or the hidden dangers. The carpenter did not intend to get paid. 10 years after he left, the rich man fell and crashed into the sharp edges of the wooden tools, and he died. Su Ming put down the wine cup in his hand and stood up. If you understand this story and what I said before, then help me do one thing. If you don't, then I will take my leave. As Su Ming spoke, he turned around and walked towards the door. Yi Wang was stunned. Su Ming's words appeared in his head, and the instant Su Ming took a step out of the door, he lifted his head swiftly. What do you want to tell me? What is strong? Prodigies with potential are not necessarily strong. Sometimes some people also have methods that are so powerful that they can kill others. Once you return to the land of immortals, help me go to Death region and take care of my senior brothers. Su Ming did not turn his head back. He walked out of the room and disappeared into the night. He walked through the quiet galaxy. When he was in Yi Wang's room just now, Su Ming had gotten rid of the final thought of possessing him. This sort of person should not die just because he was possessed. If he lived, then the universe would become more interesting. If he lived, then the Tao that Su Ming's words had planted in his heart would slowly grow until it changed Yi Wang's life. What is strong? Find your own strengths and persevere in them. Don't care about other people being better than you in other areas. Then one day, you will stand at the same spot in a different area. This is the true meaning of the phrase, the stupid bird flies first. Yi Wang, if you continue doing this, then you will no longer be a prodigy. You will also be a stupid bird. Su Ming walked slowly with an unfathomable smile on his face. He walked past the galaxies, past the people who bowed respectfully to him while hiding in the dark, and walked out of worldly star planet. At the instant he walked out, he turned his head around and cast a glance at the air. I don't like being stared at like this. I hope that there won't be a next time between us. The third chapter is a little mysterious. The next chapter will answer your questions. If there are any almighty cultivators around, you can also analyze it on your own. Please ask for monthly votes. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1000. All the living beings in the world have kismet. Within a chamber in worldly Star City were Elder Feng and Elder Yu. They stood in silence. There was a screen of light before them, and Su Ming's figure could be seen in it. He turned his head around, and his gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the screen of light and land on the two of them. They had also heard Su Ming's words, and the two of them fell silent. Elder Yu had a slightly strange expression on his face, and after some time he said in a low voice, "The fourth god of berserkers is even more sinister than the first god of berserkers. This Yi Wang is the person who gathered the kismet of the immortals over the past tens of thousands of years, which is why his potential is incredibly great. He managed to reach the middle stage of World Plane Realm within a short period of time, and his future should have been limitless. Once he joined Morning Dao sect, he took away a portion of true Morning Dao world's kismet in an unseen manner. This sort of kismet, which many people believe does not exist, will allow him to grow stronger in true Morning Dao world. The word kismet is vague, just like how the first god of berserkers gathered all the kismet in the land of berserkers. But at the end of the day, all those who have their kismet gathered on them must do things that are in accordance with this kismet, or else they will not be compatible with the kismet. At that time, their kismet will scatter and they will slowly disappear. If this Yi Wang continues cultivating with his epiphany and looks down on all lives, then this will be an art that is compatible with his kismet. He believes that the world is fair, that the weak should be weak, and the strong should be strong. If this continues, his cultivation base will have the might of the world, and he will fuse with the kismet into his body. When he speaks, he will obey the laws, and he will achieve the great Tao. But the fourth god of berserkers used his epiphany to interfere with Yi Wang's heart, causing it to be in chaos. He originally wanted to find the flaw in the fourth god of berserkers' mind, but he ended up planting someone else's Tao on himself. Because of that, if he truly did this, then he would no longer have the personality to look down on all lives. His nature will be born from his heart, and he will no longer believe that he is a prodigy. Then he will truly no longer be a prodigy. His kismet will not be compatible with his personality, and it will swiftly disappear. Then he will be a stupid bird. Elder Feng and Elder Yu shook their heads, but when they looked at Su Ming's back leaving into the distance, a strange look appeared on their faces. I can only guess that he did this because Yi Wang already had a murderous intent towards him. This murderous intent is related to Yi Wang's personality and luck. The luck of such a genius will not allow anyone to suppress it. Even if it's a draw, it will still be considered a failure. He must kill his opponent to maintain his arrogance towards the world. But I have a feeling that our Lord Fourth God of Berserkers has other intentions. Elder Yu hesitated for a moment before he spoke slowly. Could it be related to Dao Kong? A glint appeared in Elder Feng's eyes. The two of them looked at each other, but they couldn't be certain. The Tu Feng Dao Star Black auction on Ming on. On the 4 of the morning. On Dao. On Feng. On Feng Heaven. Day. On Ming. Wu. Yu Feng. On the 4th morning, Black Ink auction was held. This was a grand auction that was held once every hundreds of years in Black Ink Planet. It was not held in one of the 3 cities, but in the sky, with Blackwater City as the center, Worldly Star Planet, and Inkchilan City serving as support. Powerful rays of light shone from the 3 cities at the same time. These powerful rays of light intersected with each other in Black Ink Planet's sky. The principle behind them was similar to that of Worldly Star Planet. As they intersected with each other, an auction hall that was larger than the size of a city appeared out of nowhere. The auction hall was oval in shape and boundless. It could accommodate millions of people at the same time. The empty space in the center was where the gigantic auction platform was located. The edges of the platform were filled with illusory screens of light that could magnify all the people and items on the platform by several times, causing everyone to be able to see the items that were about to be auctioned on the auction platform clearly from all directions. Early in the morning, the light from relocation runes shone continuously in the gigantic auction hall. There were also long arcs charging towards the place from all directions. There were more than 2 million cultivators and alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean participating in Black Ink Auction this time, as they either used relocation runes or sliced through space to arrive. The auction hall was gradually filled with cultivators densely packed together. There were also a large number of large rooms around the auction hall. They were prepared for people with noble statuses. The forces of power from the four great true worlds keeping a lookout over the barren lands had all come, and they were scattered in those rooms. In fact, most of the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean were also in their own rooms to carry out the auction. There were also some cultivators who did not want their identities to be known. They would also spend a large amount of crystals in exchange for the right to enter those rooms in Black Ink Auction. The auction would last for a month. Every single day, a large amount of items would be brought out to be auctioned, causing the auction to live up to its name. Su Ming sat cross-legged in one of the rooms that belonged to him. The area before him was empty, and he could see the gigantic screen of light on the auction platform in the distance. He could also see almost the entirety of the auction hall. The 13 old men from a Yu family stood behind him quietly. Yuro had also returned. However, while her expression might have been elegant, there was something different about her. At that moment, she was by Su Ming's side, and her gaze fell on the auction hall. I've already arranged for Dao Kong to enter the 7th room. There are 9 old men by his side, and they practically never leave his side. There is also a woman by his side. Also, based on Elder Feng's investigations, there is indeed a powerful warrior in Lunar Culpa Realm by Dao Kong's side, and she is a woman. She is skilled in hiding herself, so she should be prepared to protect Dao Kong. Based on our understanding of Morning Dao sect, this woman is definitely a member of True Morning Dao World's Phoenix sect. Based on their customs, this woman should be Dao Kong's wife in the future, Lai Shan Kong Jiu said respectfully. The 3,000 fearless warriors from True Morning Dao World are left on the plains outside Blackwater City. They have constructed a relocation rune, and the eye of the rune is on Dao Kong. With just one thought from Dao Kong, he can relocate the 3,000 fearless warriors to his side. Also, when Lai Shan Kong Jiu spoke up to this point, a huge buzzing sound suddenly came from the auction hall. That sound was formed by the 1 million people, and it was so loud that it surpassed the sound of thunder. At the same time, graceful sounds of music reverberated through the entire auction hall. At that moment, 3 middle-aged men appeared on the screen of light at the center of the auction hall. With smiles on their faces, they wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards the crowd. The auction has begun. Su Ming cast a glance at the ruckus in the auction hall, then lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, the empty space before him turned into a screen of light that chased away all the sounds from the world outside, causing the room to immediately fall silent. Continue. Su Ming averted his gaze. He was not interested in the auction this time. The only thing he was interested in was Dao Kong. Also, there are subordinates in Dao Kong's 9 galactic ships. They are floating beyond Black Ink Planet and have already locked onto the auction hall. If anything goes wrong, they will kill them. There might be quite a lot of internal strife between the 4 great true worlds, but they are also working together. If anything happens to Dao Kong, then the cultivators from the other 3 great true worlds will also attack, Lai Shan Kong Jiu said in a low voice. He did not know why Su Ming wanted to target Dao Kong, but it was clear that while it would be easy to kill Dao Kong, the trouble that would follow would be very difficult to deal with. Have the rules of the auction been changed? Su Ming asked flatly. I've already made the arrangements, Lai Shan Kong Jiu quickly answered. When Dao Kong disappears, I need all of you to fight for 30 breaths for me. Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung it at the screen of light before him. Immediately, it distorted and gradually revealed the scene outside. At the same time, the voices from outside traveled into the auction hall once again. My fellow Taoists, thank you for coming to Black Ink Auction. This time, the 3 great families and all the families in Black Ink Planet will be changing the rules. Everyone, do not worry. The change in the rules this time is incredibly beneficial to all of you. In the past, the items you bid for would only be sent out once Black Ink Auction ended. But this time, we have changed the rules. As long as you bid for an item, it will be immediately sent to you. Because of this, if you need to leave beforehand, it will be much more convenient. There were quite a number of fellow Taoists who mentioned this in the past. This time, the families in Black King Planet have decided to accept this suggestion and carry it out. Su Ming looked at the auction hall outside, quietly, and listened to the voices coming from outside with a calm expression on his face. By his side, Lai Shan Kong Jiu looked as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he chose to obey. He nodded and left. Su Ming's heart was calm at that moment. Everything was going according to his plan. As long as the fish took the bait, he would be able to obtain his third clone, the cultivation-based clone. Su Ming narrowed his eyes and began waiting quietly. He watched as items were auctioned off one after another in the auction hall. The powerful sounds of people bidding for the items rose and fell, causing the entire world to boil. Yet right up to the end, not a single bid came from Dao Kong's room. However, Su Ming was not in a hurry. When the afternoon arrived and the sun shone brightly in the sky, when another item was brought out, Su Ming heard a woman placing a bid from Dao Kong's room among the numerous people placing their bids. "Get ready," Su Ming said flatly. The 13 progenitors of the Yu family behind him immediately had solemn expressions on their faces. They swiftly sat down cross-legged and surrounded Su Ming, forming a circle that was about 100-something feet in size. Their eyes shone brilliantly, and they circulated their cultivation bases. Yuro stood up and moved backwards before sitting down by the door to the room. Her task was to prevent anyone from entering. By her side was the Duke of Crimson Flame. He would guard the door with Yuro. Fourth update, please get monthly votes. There will be another explosion this week. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1001. I'm definitely getting this Heavenly Forest branch. Vermilion crystals. Everyone knows that this Heavenly Forest branch can allow my disciples to sculpt their spirits and gather their souls together. It can even allow them to avoid all the bottlenecks below Earth Cultivation Realm. I'll offer 4,500,000. 5 million. The woman's voice came languidly from Dao Kong's room. 7 million. At the instant the woman's voice rang out, an indifferent voice came from another room and echoed in the auction hall. Once that price was placed, all the bidders in the area fell silent. Buying that Heavenly Forest branch at such a high price was a little too much. Even Dao Kong's room fell silent. Su Ming frowned. "It's someone from true Sacredine world," Yuro said softly. Su Ming did not speak. The frown between his brows slowly disappeared, and his expression became calm once again. He knew that he could not rush this matter. Unless Dao Kong did not manage to buy a single item during the past month, he would definitely fall into Su Ming's trap. Dressed in the sacred constellation robe, Dao Kong sat on a long bench in his room. At that moment, neither joy nor anger could be seen on his face. He held a wine cup in his hand and swirled the wine in it. His gaze fell on the auction hall beyond the illusory screen of light before him. Behind him were the 9 old men who had their eyes closed and were meditating. Ripples of power spread out from their bodies and filled the entire room. As for the woman with pointy ears, she was kneeling by Dao Kong's side and had her head lowered to reveal the delicate skin on her neck. This is just the first day, and those people from true Sacredine world are already unable to hold themselves back from competing against me. Dao Kong smiled in a carefree manner and finished the wine in his cup in one gulp. When he lifted his hand, a black hoop could be seen on his right index finger. That hoop was not a physical object, but was branded on Dao Kong's finger like a thread. This was a relocation rune. With just one thought from Dao Kong, the 3,000 fearless warriors by his side would immediately be relocated to him. It's a pity, a pity. There was a ghastly look in Dao Kong's smile. He put down the wine cup and closed his eyes. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, dusk arrived on the first day of Black Ink Auction. Ever since Dao Kong placed his bid, the young woman's voice would come from his room once every few items were placed. The prices they offered were neither high nor low. If no one offered a price, it would be a good deal, but if someone else offered a price, it would be barely worth it. Besides, once someone continued bidding, Dao Kong would fall silent. He would not place a second bid for the same item. As he looked at the dusk in the sky beyond, Su Ming's expression remained calm. Black ink auction was not only held during the day. It would also be held at night, and it would last for a month. For mortals, this was something they could not endure. They would probably only be able to endure for 2 or 3 days before they would be exhausted. However, for cultivators, it was normal to not sleep or rest for a month. Thus, when dusk passed and night fell, rays of powerful light appeared in the auction house. These rays of light intersected in the sky, and in an instant, the world felt as if it was daytime. In the distance, the stars could be seen. The perfect balance between the brightness of the place and the stars in the distance formed an incredibly beautiful picture, causing all those who saw it to be unable to help themselves from gasping in admiration. As the sun and moon alternated, 3 days went by. During these 3 days, Su Ming continued paying attention to every single action in the ranking hall, but he did not wait for Dao Kong to walk into his plan. During these 3 days, Dao Kong was the same as on the first day. He would still place a bid for a few items, but it was clear that he would not buy them. The people in the ranking hall also gradually noticed Dao Kong's actions, and gradually, no one paid any attention to him anymore. After all, every single item brought out in black ink auction was valuable, and it was usually very difficult to obtain them in any other place besides during this period of time. That was why every single item that was put up for auction would cause quite a number of people to fight for them. What is he waiting for? Su Ming closed his eyes. If Dao Kong did not buy anything, then it meant that he could not continue with his plan. In silence, Su Ming continued calming himself down. Time trickled by unbeknownst to him as the voices in the world outside grew louder. The further it went on in black ink auction, the rarer the items brought out became, and the greater the importance placed on them and the desire to obtain them became. This item comes from Divine Essence Star Ocean, and it gathers the entire galaxy within 10,000 lis to form a drop of divine liquid. This liquid can change endlessly, and its effects are endless. My fellow Taoists, the starting bid for this drop of Divine Essence Star liquid is 30 million crystals. I can tell all of you that there are only 5 drops of this divine liquid in black ink auction this time, and this is the first drop. 7 days later, when the black ink auction was in a hubbub, the person that hosted the auction this time took out the first precious treasure that caused the hearts of everyone in the surroundings to shake. This was the first valuable item to be brought out in this auction. Almost at the instant the auctioneer's words left his mouth, a series of excited, gloomy, and high-spirited voices rang out one after another. 3,300 crystals, 37 million, 40 million. The intensity of the voices rose and fell. In fact, quite a number of people in the rooms in the area also placed their bids. The appearance of the divine liquid caused all the people in the auction hall to descend into madness, and in the blink of an eye, the price rose to more than 60 million. Su Ming looked at the ruckus in the auction hall with a calm expression on his face. There were originally not 5 drops of divine liquid, but 10. However, he had taken the remaining 5 drops, and they were now in his storage bag. Divine Essence Star liquid could be drunk and smelled. If a person smelled it, then 1 drop of it could be smelled 100 times. Every single time they took a whiff of it, it could allow a person's cultivation base to immediately return to its peak after it was completely drained. It was an item that all cultivators could only dream of. Divine liquid was not the only mysterious item that had the same effect, but the other items were also incredibly difficult to obtain. Once a person's level of cultivation was high, their effects would be reduced. However, this divine liquid could allow all those who were below solar Kulpa realm to completely recover their cultivation base. In fact, if an old monster in solar Kulpa realm swallowed a single drop, they could also achieve the same effect. During a critical moment, this drop of divine liquid would be a chance for them to survive. If there was someone skilled in alchemy who could use this liquid as the main ingredient to create a star ocean core, then its effects would be even better for the old monsters in Solar Culpa realm. Because of that, it was not strange for the price of this item to soar. Let's see whether you'll be tempted by this item. Su Ming's gaze fell on Dao Kong's room, and he waited quietly. In Dao Kong's room, Dao Kong's eyes burned brightly as he stared at the divine liquid displayed on the screen of light on the platform of the auction hall. As he listened to the waves of voices placing their bids, a hint of hesitation appeared on his face. When the divine liquid was bought by someone for 75 million crystals, Dao Kong sighed in his heart. He had already given up on the remaining 4 drops of divine liquid that were being auctioned off. This item might be good, but even if I buy it and give it to the seniors in my family, I won't be able to get too many benefits. As for my own use, there are similar medicinal cores in Morning Dao sect. After all, I'm only in the middle stage of World Plane Realm. Other medicinal cores can also allow me to recover my cultivation base once I run out. There's no need for me to spend so much money to buy this item. Dao Kong remained silent for a moment, then shook his head. When the remaining 4 drops of divine liquid were auctioned off, he still did not place any bids. This scene caused Su Ming to frown. It had been 7 days, and a small portion of the auction had already been completed, but Su Ming still did not see Dao Kong make any purchases. This caused him to frown, and a contemplative look appeared on his face. After a long while, Su Ming closed his eyes and continued waiting. The 8th day, the 9th day, the 10th day, when 15 days went by and half of the auction had already been completed, Dao Kong's bids were mostly just for show. He never truly wanted to buy anything. When the 20th day arrived and the auction hall brought out another valuable item, causing a commotion among the people, Su Ming still did not wait for Dao Kong to fight for it. Dao Kong watched the items being auctioned off during the 20 days in resignation. It was not that he did not want to buy them, but he could not use all the crystals he had this time. He had a secret deal with the Hua family, and once the auction ended, he would use crystals and some spots to exchange for the items. This was his mission when he came to the barren lands of divine essence in the past. As for the auction, it was just a formality to him. What a pity, what a pity. Dao Kong sighed, picked up his wine cup, and took a sip. Time passed once again, and the 23rd day arrived. Su Ming slowly opened his eyes. There were 7 more days before Black Ink auction would end. There might be quite a number of treasures that would be brought out to be auctioned during the final 7 days, but Su Ming could already tell that Dao Kong had absolutely no intention to bid for anything in the auction. There was no need for him to wait for the remaining 7 days. A freezing glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Since you don't want to join the auction, then I will force you to join it. Su Ming smiled coldly. He lifted his right hand and struck his body. Immediately, light shone from his body, and a dazzling long arc flew out towards Yuro. Take this item and join the next auction. The starting bid is 10 million crystals, Su Ming said coldly. Yuro was momentarily stunned. She cast a glance at the dazzling item in her hand, then lowered her head and walked out of the room. After a moment, when Yuro returned, she found herself in the auction hall outside. Once the item that had been put up for bidding was put up for auction, the auctioneer's slightly excited voice rang out. The item that will be put up for auction this time is not a strange treasure from Divine Essence Star Ocean. Neither is it a strange item from sinful barren lands. It is from the 4 great true worlds. Among the 4 great true worlds is the most eye-catching treasure from true Morning Dao world. This sort of treasure is incredibly difficult for outsiders to obtain. In fact, it can be said that if any outsider possesses it, they will attract the killing intent of true Morning Dao world and Morning Dao sect, who will not rest until one of them dies. Because each of these treasures represents a bloody massacre, and each of them represents the death of a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect. As the auctioneer's voice echoed in the air, the auction hall immediately fell into dead silence. Dao Kong had his eyes closed in his room, but once he heard those words, he opened them swiftly and looked over. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1002. At the instant Dao Kong looked over, the excited voice of the auctioneer reverberated through the entire auction hall once again. Perhaps some of you have already guessed what this treasure is. That's right. It is the sacred constellation robe that the direct descendants of Morning Dao sect in true Morning Dao world are born with, and each of them can only have one in their lives. The sacred constellation robe contains the strongest divine ability in Morning Dao sect. It can allow the person who wears it to enslave all manner of people. And this item can also grow until the strongest person will appear among the direct descendants of each generation in Morning Dao sect. If you are afraid of true Morning Dao world, then you absolutely cannot buy the sacred constellation robe, or else you will bring upon yourself a great disaster. My fellow Taoists from the alien races in Divine Essence Star Ocean, this is the best chance for you to study Morning Dao sect. Once you study this item, you can even find the secrets of Morning Dao sect. Besides, you don't need to worry about Morning Dao sect taking revenge on you. People from the other three great true worlds, if you want to obtain a sacred constellation robe, you must kill a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect, and this will stir up a war between the great true worlds. But now, if you buy this item here, then you will have the best reason to study Morning Dao sect secrets. People from true Morning Dao world, if you buy this item and bring it back to Morning Dao sect, then with how much Morning Dao sect cares about each and every direct descendant, this will definitely be a great meritorious deed. As the excited voice echoed in the air, Dao Kong stood up from his chair. In fact, when he stood up, he knocked over his wine cup, causing it to fall to the ground and spill wine. However, he did not notice any of this. His gaze was fixed on the screen of light on the auction platform, on the item that had been brought out and displayed before all the people in the auction hall. The sacred constellation robe. Shock appeared on his face, and booming sounds reverberated in his head. With just one glance, he could tell that this was not a fake item. It was the real sacred constellation robe, an item that only the direct descendants of Morning Dao sect could possess. In fact, he could even sense the bloody stench on the sacred constellation robe. Vaguely, he felt as if he could see the shrill screams of his family members before they died. My fellow Taoists, I can tell you with absolute certainty that this is the first and only sacred constellation robe that Black Ink Planet has ever auctioned off. It has never appeared before, and in the future, I'm afraid that it will never appear again. This is your only chance. This Stellar Saint robe starting price is 10 million crystals. The voice of the auctioneer was extremely infectious. As his voice reverberated in the air, everyone in the auction hall instantly fell silent. There was greed, delight, and derision in those gazes. There were also many gazes that instantly gathered on the rooms in the area to search for the people from true Morning Dao world. They longed to see the expressions of the people from true Morning Dao world when they saw the sacred constellation robe. Their expressions would definitely be very interesting. Damn it, Dao Kong's expression twisted. He kicked away the woman kneeling beside him and strode towards the screen of light in front of him. He glared at the sacred constellation robe, and his relaxed and calm demeanor was completely gone at that instant. He also hated Black Ink Planet for daring to bring this item out to be auctioned. In fact, he hated the auctioneer down to his bones because he had spoken in far too much detail. Based on his words, it was as if he wanted the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean to immediately place their bids to buy it. It was just as he had said. Once the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean bought this item, then true Morning Dao world would be unable to do anything about it, and it would be impossible for them to retrieve it. However, even if the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean did not buy this item, once it was bought by the other three great true worlds, then it would be just as the auctioneer had said. The three great true worlds would be auctioning off the sacred constellation robe, and no slaughter would be involved. Because of that, if Morning Dao sect wanted to take back the sacred constellation robe, then they would have to pay an even higher price than when they bought it. However, this was not the worst-case scenario. The worst-case scenario was if Dao Kong watched the sacred constellation robe be bought by someone else, then no matter what the reason was, even if it was because he did not have enough crystals. As long as the sacred constellation robe was bought before his eyes, then he would have to bear the wrath of Morning Dao sect. Even if he was a direct descendant, the Council of Sect Elders would definitely let him know what cruelty was. Damn it! Damn it! A low growl came from Dao Kong's throat, and red instantly appeared in his eyes. He had not expected that he would run into something like this in Black Ink Planet. Besides, he knew very well that each of the sacred constellation robes belonging to a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect was incredibly valuable, and they were all recorded in detail. Once a family member died, then it would be a major incident. However, he had been in the barren lands of divine essence for more than 1,000 years, and he had not paid much attention to this matter. After all, the Council of Sect Elders would naturally investigate and deal with the deaths of family members. He needed to return to the sect to know just which direct descendant had died. However, before he came to the barren lands of divine essence, he knew that over the countless years in the sect, only 3 sacred constellation robes had been lost. 2 of them had been retrieved, but the last one had been lost 20,000 years ago, and there had been no news of it. No matter what sort of power Morning Dao sect used, they could not find it. As red filled Dao Kong's eyes, a light chuckle reached his ears. That chuckle seemed to have come from the air, and the person who had laughed could not be seen. Shut up! Dao Kong turned his head around and swept his gaze across the area. I'm laughing at myself. What does it have to do with you? If Morning Dao sect learns that you allowed someone else to buy this sacred constellation robe, I'd like to see how you will explain yourself when you return to Morning Dao sect. The woman's airy voice traveled forth from the area at a moderate pace. Dao Kong's expression was incredibly dark. Just as he was about to speak, the auction hall fell into a brief period of dead silence before voices immediately began placing bids. Interesting. I'll offer 11 million crystals for this sacred constellation robe. Huh, 15 million. Why are you all so petty? I'll offer 30 million. The voices placing bids rammed into Dao Kong's heart. He clenched his fists. He knew that the people in the area knew that true Morning Dao sect would definitely buy this robe, which was why they had intentionally raised the price. In fact, if he truly cannot buy it, then Morning Dao sect would have to pay several times the price if they wanted to take back the sacred constellation robe. It could be said that this was a deal that would definitely benefit them. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had the right to stand on equal footing with Morning Dao sect, or else this sort of action would be equivalent to them asking for death. Su Ming watched everything happening in the auction hall, and a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. He originally did not want to bring out the sacred constellation robe, but since Dao Kong had no intention of participating in the auction, then Su Ming had to bring out something that would force Dao Kong to buy it. Su Ming was not worried about other people buying it. He knew that this was something that Dao Kong was determined to get his hands on. If someone else bought it, Dao Kong would definitely descend into madness. The value of this item is endless. How can a mere 30 million crystals match up to this item status? True Sacredine World will offer 50 million. Since True Sacredine World has offered this price, then the Emperor of Abyss True World will naturally not fall behind. 70 million. 80 million. A voice with a slightly strange accent traveled forth. It was clear that this voice did not belong to someone from the 4 great true worlds, but an alien race from Divine Essence Star Ocean. 100 million crystals. Dao Kong could no longer sit around and watch. In fact, he did not even have his servant by his side place a bid. He spoke on his own, and his voice reverberated through the entire auction hall, stirring up a large number of soft chuckles. This is an item from True Morning Dao World. All those who dare to participate in the auction will have to think about True Morning Dao World's revenge. There is a bloody stench on this item. It might have been a long time ago, but it involves the death of a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect. If any of you participate in this auction, then you will make me suspect whether this item originally belonged to you, and you are using this auction to make this item shine in the light so that you can wash away the blood feud between you and the members of Morning Dao sect. Dao Kong was not a fool. With such potential and true Morning Dao World's kismet, there was no way he would be an ordinary person. Within a short period of time, he had thought of these words, and it immediately caused the people from the other great true worlds who were about to place a bid to be stunned. This Dao Kong's reaction sure is fast, but the more he acts this way, the better it is. Su Ming smiled faintly. As he watched the storm raging in the auction hall, he knew that Dao Kong would definitely walk into the plan he had set for him. 130 million spar. The strange voice from the alien race from Divine Essence, Star Ocean, traveled forth once again. There was a hoarse quality to it, and even though the tone was slightly different, the ancient feeling in it revealed the age of the person who spoke. Others might pay some attention to true Morning Dao world, but the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean did not care about it all. The distance between them was too great, and even if true Morning Dao world's anger surged to a monstrous degree, it would be difficult for them to take too many vengeful actions against the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean. 150 million. Dao Kong's expression was completely twisted, and a ferocious expression appeared on his face. His heart might be bleeding, and he knew that he would not be able to complete his mission this time. But compared to the sacred constellation robe, he would immediately be rewarded greatly when he returned to Morning Dao sect. There was no need for him to be too bothered by the fact that he did not manage to complete his mission. 200 million crystals. A light chuckle reverberated in the air. The appearance of that voice immediately stunned the cultivators in the auction hall, because the woman's voice had come from Dao Kong's room. Su Hui. Dao Kong turned around swiftly in his room and glared at the space around him. He was practically gnashing his teeth in exasperation. I'll buy this item and give it to Morning Dao sect as a gift to break the engagement with you. That should be possible, right? The woman said with a light chuckle. There was no way Dao Kong would agree to this, even though he would not suffer any loss if Su Hui bought the sacred constellation robe, and he could continue completing his mission. In truth, this was already a loss. He would lose his wife, lose his first breakthrough in dual cultivation after he reached Plain Culpa Realm, and also lose the engagement. His reputation in true Morning Dao world would suffer a severe blow. This was something the prideful him could not accept. 300 million, Dao Kong said in a dark voice. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1003. Once Dao Kong's words were spoken, the entire auction hall instantly fell silent. The price of 300 million crystals could be said to be an astronomical price. It was difficult to say whether it was worth it to buy a sacred constellation robe with this sort of price. After all, most outsiders had only heard of the specific effects of the sacred constellation robe. The only ones who truly knew about it were the direct descendants of Morning Dao sect. In fact, when Dao Kong placed that price, he felt as if his heart was being pierced repeatedly by a sharp sword. That price could be said to be all of his savings. However, he was already in a situation where he could not back down. Even if he had to borrow crystals, he had to buy that sacred constellation robe. Besides, this matter was related to his fiancée. Because of that, he had no reason to give up on that sacred constellation robe. Even if he had to grind his teeth to pieces, he had to buy it. Once he placed the price of 300 million crystals, Su Hui instantly let out a light chuckle. She knew that breaking off the engagement with Dao Kong was definitely not an easy task. This was related to the tradition of Morning Dao sect and Phoenix sect, and one sacred constellation robe could not be used to determine whether they could break this tradition. Besides, she only found Dao Kong to be an eyesore, but she also knew that she might eventually become his wife. Making him pay a little more would be a way to vent her anger, which was why she chuckled softly and did not place any more bids. The auction hall fell into a brief period of silence. Even the alien tribes from Divine Essence Star Ocean did not place any more bids. After all, 300 million crystals was not a small sum. The middle-aged man who hosted the auction still had a smile on his face. Once he looked around, he let out a hearty laugh. Since no one else is bidding for it, then this sacred constellation robe, which has been auctioned for the first time in countless years in Blacking Planet, will belong to true Morning Dao world. Once he said those words, two graceful women walked out from the air behind him. Once they picked up the sacred constellation robe, they disappeared without a trace. Only at that moment did Dao Kong let out a sigh of relief in his heart. The auction continued. Once the middle-aged man brought out another item to be auctioned, the bustle in the auction hall rose once more, just as it always did. The sounds of people bidding rose and fell, but to Dao Kong, all of it had already disappeared from his ears. He turned his head around to look at the door to his room. After about 10 breaths of time, someone knocked on the door. As the door to the room was opened, the sacred constellation robe was placed in a box, and it was sent to Dao Kong's room by the two graceful women with respectful expressions. Immediately, the woman with pointy ears walked forward and took the box. Once she examined it carefully, she brought it to Dao Kong. Dao Kong's gaze fell on the box, and a glint appeared in his eyes. I'll have to trouble the 9 elders to help me check if this item has been tampered with. Once Dao Kong spoke, the 9 old men who had their eyes closed not too far away from him lifted their right hands at the same time and pushed at the air towards the box. Distortions immediately appeared around the box. As the space distorted, the box silently turned into dust, revealing the sacred constellation robe inside. The robe floated in midair, and the space around it distorted, but there was not the slightest fluctuation in the distortions. Instead, the robe was extremely clear, and the starlight shining on it gave off a dazzling feeling. After a moment, one of the 9 old men said in a hoarse voice, "Everything is normal." A hint of excitement that he could not hide flashed briefly on Dao Kong's face. He was incredibly excited in his heart. There were pros and cons to the robe's appearance in this place, but once he bought it, there would be no more cons. Instead, the benefits would be magnified endlessly. If I bring this back to Morning Dao sect, I will have done a great service. A smile appeared on Dao Kong's face. He lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the sacred constellation robe. First, let me see just which direct descendant is in possession of this robe. Dao Kong was a cautious person, which was why even if he had bought the sacred constellation robe and the woman had checked it, he still had the 9 old men he trusted the most work together to check it. All 9 of them had extraordinary levels of cultivation, and when they were together, Dao Kong could ignore a large number of dangers. With just one thought from him, the 3,000 fearless warriors could instantly descend on him. There is nothing for him to be afraid of, and neither did he believe that there was anything that could cause him to run into danger, unless it was a master of fate, lives, and death. However, even he did not believe that a powerful warrior who was a master of fate, lives, and death would personally cause trouble to him. That was why before his hand touched the sacred constellation robe, the smile on his face grew brighter. However, at the instant his hand touched the sacred constellation robe, the 9 old men suddenly shuddered. "Let go." The 9 people let out low roars at the same time and instantly stood up. A vast presence spread out violently from their bodies with a bang, causing the room to start swaying as if the ground was shaking and the mountains were shaking. The figure of a woman took a step out of the indistinct space behind Dao Kong. She lifted her hand and seized the sacred constellation robe. However, they were still too late. In fact, Dao Kong did not even have the time to register what was going on. Once he touched the sacred constellation robe, a loud bang immediately rang out in his head. His vision blurred for an instant, and a power of relocation swiftly spread out from the sacred constellation robe. It swept up his body, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. His expression changed swiftly. Before his vision could become clear, he immediately sent out his divine thought without any hesitation to have the 3,000 fearless warriors descend on him. However, almost at the instant this thought appeared in his mind, a great wave of impact charged straight into his mind with a bang. Under that impact, Dao Kong's heart instantly roared, and his mind went blank for a period of time. All he could vaguely see was that he had been teleported to an unfamiliar location. There were more than 10 people sitting cross-legged around him, radiating intense pressure that was like an inescapable net. His aura was completely locked down, and he couldn't move at all. The last thing he saw was a calm face. That face was not old, but belonged to a young man, and he looked rather familiar to Dao Kong. That person was looking at him, and his eyes were profound, as if they contained an endless universe within them. They could cause a person to be instantly lost within them. He saw the young man lift his right hand and push it against the top of his skull. After that, Dao Kong's world turned dark. With an indifferent expression, Su Ming pressed his right hand against the top of Dao Kong's skull. At the instant he lowered his hand, he closed his eyes, and his soul instantly left his body. Through his right hand, it charged towards Dao Kong's body with a bang. Dao Kong's body trembled viciously. His expression was twisted, and his eyes were bloodshot, but they were lifeless. However, based on his expression, it could be seen that the pain he was enduring at that moment was definitely not something ordinary. Yu Rou and the Duke of Crimson Flame guarded the door. When they turned their heads around, they saw Su Ming and Dao Kong. The Duke of Crimson Flame was in a slightly better state. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes, but when Yu Rou saw Su Ming's actions, her expression immediately changed. She had been trying to guess what Su Ming's goal was. After all, it would be easy to kill Dao Kong in this place, but there would be plenty of trouble after that. Only at that moment did she know that Su Ming's goal was not to kill him, but to possess him. Compared to her, the 13 progenitors of the Yu family beside Dao Kong were even calmer. In their hearts, Su Ming was their ancestor and their god. They would not make any guesses about his orders and actions, but would complete them regardless of the cost. The deathly silence and bizarre atmosphere in Su Ming's room became a stark contrast compared to the world outside. Almost at the instant Dao Kong was relocated, a loud bang that surged into the sky shot out from Dao Kong's room, as if a windstorm had swept through it. As the booming sounds reverberated in the air, 9 figures rushed out as if they had gone mad. Naturally, they were the 9 old men who had their eyes closed. At the instant they rushed out, they opened their eyes at the same time. At the instant they did so, it could be seen that there were no pupils in their eyes. Instead, they were completely white. That white was not pale, but the color of bones. Booming sounds rose swiftly at that moment. As they reverberated in the air, the 9 people were like 9 enraged dragons that charged into each room in the auction hall. Wherever they went, they did not care about anything else as they searched madly. They could sense that Dao Kong had not been relocated too far away. He was nearby. What are you doing? Enemy ambush. They're from true Morning Dao world. Enraged roars immediately came from the rooms in the auction hall as the 9 people charged into the room. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the 9 people brought out their full power, and each of them was using the powerful force of those in the later stage of World Plane Realm. A woman dressed in purple walked out from the air behind the 9 people. Her long hair danced in the air, and she was so beautiful that she could compare to Yu Rou. Both of them could be said to be matchless. Over there, her voice was cold and aloof. Purple light shone in her eyes 7 times before she pointed at a room in the distance. That room was where Su Ming was. She had been able to find Dao Kong because when she was betrothed to him, her life had already been linked to his by Morning Dao Sect and Phoenix Sect. That was why she had been able to sense Dao Kong's location within such a short period of time. Once she spoke, the 9 old men whose eyes were shining with white light lifted their heads simultaneously and stared at the room Su Hui had pointed at. With their full speed, they charged towards the room while slicing through the air. There was also a figure of a woman who was with the 9 old men. In fact, she was even faster than them as she charged towards the room. That woman was not Su Hui, but the young married woman. At first glance, her body seemed to have turned into a cat. She was so fast that in the blink of an eye, she had already arrived at the door. That was especially true of her hands, which had sharp nails that were 3 inches long. Su Hui's eyes turned cold. She moved, and a bright moon instantly manifested behind her. Her level of cultivation had already reached lunar Kulpa realm. Black ink planet, how dare you set up true Morning Dao world in such a brazen manner during the auction? Su Hui moved, and murderous intent appeared in her eyes. But almost at the instant she said those words, a cold harumph reverberated in the air. People from True Morning Dao World, the auction is still ongoing. You will have to give Black Ink Planet an explanation for your actions. As the cold harumph echoed in the air, a gust of wind that could destroy space appeared in front of Su Hui. 9 figures appeared at the same time in front of the 9 old men. In fact, an old man also appeared in front of the woman who had turned into a catwoman. He lifted his palm and stopped the catwoman in her tracks. When she saw the people's messages, she felt warmth in her heart. She had made them worried. The examination results came out one after another. There were many reasons for it, and even the hospital could not explain them clearly. The dizziness was much better now, and it was not as serious as before, but the ringing in her ears was getting worse. There were 3 sets of drips every day, and one of them could only drip 20 drops per hour. Over the past few days, I've been dripping drips for about 7 hours every day. But I keep missing updates, and I feel really bad about it. I'll be riding in the hospital for the next few days, and I'll be updating my story once every day. Please understand. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1004. The 13 old men were sitting cross-legged in Su Ming's room. They circulated all their cultivation bases, and once they gathered together, they turned into a powerful, mighty pressure that enveloped Dao Kong's body. Su Ming closed his eyes, and so did Dao Kong. However, Dao Kong's body was trembling violently. At that moment, he felt as if the sky and earth had been turned upside down in his mind. Booming sounds that surged into the sky reverberated in his mind, and it was as if the sky had collapsed and the earth had cracked. Who are you? Just who are you? The world in Dao Kong's mind was a dazzling void. He stood there and roared. There was a hint of despair and fear in his voice, and it spread out madly in his mind. What answered him was a cold harumph and a gigantic figure. That figure was formed by Su Ming's soul. He stood in the world in Dao Kong's mind like a god who had descended in the world. His cold harumph also seemed to be able to make Dao Kong's mind and world crumble, causing it to tremble violently. You don't need to know my name, Su Ming said flatly. Su Ming said flatly. His gigantic body lifted his right hand and pushed it swiftly towards Dao Kong. With it, his palm instantly grew infinitely larger and charged towards Dao Kong. Dao Kong's expression was ferocious, and madness appeared on his face. If he still could not tell what was going on, then he would not be worthy of being called a prodigy. You want to possess me? Damn it. Even if you successfully possess me, it'll be difficult for you to escape death. As Dao Kong roared, he lifted his hands. His cultivation base, his soul, and all his thoughts gathered on his hands as if they were boiling at that moment to stop Su Ming's hand from pressing down on him. A bang shot up, and Dao Kong's body shuddered. In his eyes, Su Ming's right hand was continuously growing larger, as if it could replace the heavens. As he pushed down, Dao Kong could not fight back at all. In an instant, that hand covered his body. At the same time, an intense pain that made him feel as if he was being torn apart appeared in Dao Kong's soul. That pain was as if a will was tearing through his soul with great force and invading it, wiping away his consciousness bit by bit and mercilessly. It was as if this was a phenomenon that could not be reversed and was a fact that no amount of power could change. All of this caused Dao Kong's roars to become shrill and his madness to turn into despair. He had seen others try to possess others, but he had never thought that one day he would have to face someone else's possession. This kind of fear could not be described with words. It was a despair that was countless times more miserable than death. Damn it, you were the one who brought out that sacred constellation robe. Your goal was to lure me into buying it. You hid a relocation rune in that sacred constellation robe. You killed the owner of that sacred constellation robe. Even if you possess me, Morning Dao sect will definitely not spare you. Dao Kong roared fiercely, but the hand that covered his body made it seem as if the world had been compressed together, causing his body to be unable to fight back. The feeling of his soul being torn apart and of being invaded and wiped away became even stronger. He could sense that in at most 10 breaths of time, his soul would scatter into nothingness. Why did you want to possess me? If it's about potential, then there's Yi Wang in Black Ink Planet. His potential is even better than mine. Let me go, and I'll help you capture Yi Wang and possess him. I can even recommend you to become a guest of Morning Dao sect. Let me go, I don't want to be possessed. Dao Kong was practically begging. Once he said those words, he immediately felt the mighty pressure on his body relax slightly. In fact, the tearing of his soul no longer became more intense, and desire immediately rose in his heart. Almost at the instant he sensed the mighty pressure relaxing, a powerful killing intent rose in Dao Kong's heart. Without any hesitation, he used the chance to chant a few complicated and difficult-to-understand incantations from his mouth. Praying. At the instant he said those 3 words, a powerful ray of light erupted from his body with a bang. It surrounded his body, and 3 complicated runic symbols appeared. They reverberated violently in the light, and a vast presence spread out from the 3 runic symbols and the powerful light without holding anything back. Progenitor, save me. Dao Kong immediately roared fiercely towards the 3 runic symbols. A barely noticeable cold sneer appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. He had been waiting for Dao Kong to execute this move all this while. He believed that with Dao Kong's potential, he was definitely not someone Dao Ren could hope to compare to in Morning Dao sect. Because of that, there was a high possibility that there was some sort of powerful warrior's protection art on Dao Kong's body. If this sort of art was forced out passively, then it would be out of Dao Kong's control, and it would not fit Su Ming's plan. That was why Su Ming had intentionally made the mighty pressure loosen. Because of that, Dao Kong, who had been forced into a corner, would definitely seize the chance to execute the art to protect his life. Because of this, Su Ming could control the time when this art would appear. Once he did, he would be able to complete the most crucial part of his plan to possess Dao Kong. How could he make the people in Morning Dao sect believe that the Dao Kong who would appear before them in the future would be the real Dao Kong? I won't even need 15 breaths to possess you. Su Ming's lips curled up into a cold sneer. At the instant the 3 runic symbols in the strong light let out ripples, he pounced on Dao Kong. This scene made it seem as if Su Ming's gigantic body had turned into fog and seeped into Dao Kong's body, crashing into the strong light and the runic symbols. Loud booming sounds reverberated continuously in Dao Kong's mind. Su Ming's body looked as if he had been forcefully wiped off by the strong light and was swiftly disappearing. At the instant his body completely disappeared, Dao Kong's distorted face froze for an instant with a terrified expression, but that pause disappeared the next instant. His face was still distorted, and there was still fear lingering in it. However, there was a difference in the depths of his eyes that no one else could notice. That difference changed Dao Kong's cold and sinister expression, turning it into a profound look. Damn it, you want to possess me? No one can possess me. Dao Kong threw his head back and roared. The world in his mind immediately distorted and gradually became indistinct. His body turned into a gigantic vortex that submerged him and disappeared without a trace. The people from Lishan family and Morning Dao sect were fighting against each other outside Su Ming's room. While Black Ink auction is going on, your actions have violated the laws of Black Ink Planet. Even if you are from true Morning Dao world, you are not allowed to act so presumptuously. An old voice traveled forth languidly from the wind that could destroy space that had suddenly appeared in front of Su Hui. At the same time, Senior Feng's archaic figure appeared out of thin air. He flicked his sleeve, and Su Hui's face fell. She staggered backward several paces, and her pupils constricted. She was not the only one who retreated. The 9 old men who had been following Dao Kong previously also opened their eyes. They moved back simultaneously, and with each step they took, the ground would tremble. The ones who stopped the 9 of them were also 9 old men. They belonged to different families, but all of them were from Black Ink Planet, and all of them belonged to Black Ink Dao. The incredibly fast Catwoman let out a piercing screech, and her body moved backwards as if it was twisting. She was forced back several dozens of feet, and a curtain of rain surrounded her, causing her body to look indistinct and indistinct. Interesting. Do you have too many powerful warriors in Black Ink Planet that you could instantly appear here? Or did you make preparations a long time ago to wait for Dao Kong to disappear so that you could stop us? Su Hui's pupils shrank, and she spoke with a cold sneer. Black Ink Planet, I don't care why you appeared here, but if you insist on stopping us, then this will stir up an all-out war between True Morning Dao World and Black Ink Planet. Dao Kong, a direct descendant of True Morning Dao World's Morning Dao sect, has disappeared. You will have to give us an explanation for this. Elder Feng's expression was calm. Based on Su Ming's request, he only needed to hold them back for the span of 15 breaths. The time was almost up. He cast a glance at the people from Morning Dao sect, especially at Su Hui duo. May I know how a direct descendant of True Morning Dao sect disappeared? Please tell us in detail. If he has truly disappeared in Black Ink Auction, then I will naturally not stop you. Instead, I will work together with True Morning Dao World to search for your direct descendant, Elder Feng said flatly. He calculated the time in his heart. It had already been 15 breaths. He might not know Su Ming's goal, but to ensure that no accidents would happen, it would be better if he could stall for a little longer. But if you can't give us an explanation, then based on your reckless actions just now, True Morning Dao World will no longer be allowed to step into Black Ink Planet. Right when Elder Feng finished speaking, someone among the 9 old men immediately let out a cold harumph. Just now, the young master bought the sacred constellation robe, and once you brought it over, the young master touched it and was immediately relocated. I refuse to believe that this has nothing to do with Black Ink Planet. Oh, Hong Jiao, go to the room in True Morning Dao World and check whether there are any ripples of relocation there, Elder Feng said calmly. Lai Shan Kong Jiao immediately lowered his head and voiced his obedience, then walked towards the room where the people from Morning Dao sect had been. The 9 old men beside Dao Kong had incredibly dark expressions on their faces at that moment. However, this was Black Ink Planet, and there were 9 people whose levels of cultivation were not any weaker than their standing in their way, causing them to be unable to break through. Su Hui smiled coldly. She cast a glance at the room where she could sense Dao Kong's presence, then suddenly moved. Her body split into 4 and charged towards the room where Su Ming was from different directions. Elder Feng frowned. As he swung his arm, a violent gust of wind immediately stirred up. Just as it was about to sweep up the 4 Su Hui figures, she smiled coldly. The 4 figures moved once again, and in the blink of an eye, a total of 16 of her appeared before the people's eyes. Charge in! The 16 Su Huis shouted at the same time. The Catwoman immediately let out a shrill howl, and her body changed completely. Most of her transformation was that of a beast, making it seem as if she had turned into a real cat, and she charged towards the door. The 9 old men coughed up a mouthful of blood at the same time, as if they had activated some sort of forbidden art. Their levels of cultivation increased exponentially, and like 9 rampaging dragons, they rushed towards the door. 18 strikes of the Lake of Phoenix. You're a member of Phoenix sect. Elder Feng's pupils shrank. The 16 Su Huis lifted their right hands together and struck the door to Su Ming's room through the air. As booming sounds reverberated in the air outside Su Ming's room distorted, and the 17th Su Hui appeared. Her appearance seemed to have borne the power of the 16 Su Huis' strike, and once it gathered on her body, it turned into the 17th strike. With a speed that could not be stopped, she struck the door. Boom! The door shattered, but the instant it exploded, a deep and steady voice rang out from within the shattered door. Su Hui, I'm fine. I intend to write a role-playing game. I admit that I'm a little evil. Perhaps this is related to a book I read in the past. That book was about waking up and becoming someone else. air, enjoying everything that someone else had. Ahem, that was a very serious and pure sci-fi novel that was not at all perverted. Perhaps this is my retribution for being hospitalized. I'm still hospitalized, I'm still lying on the bed in the corridor, and there's still no room for me. I'm begging for monthly votes. Su Ming intends to cosplay. I'm begging for monthly votes to encourage me to resist evil and continue writing serious and pure role-playing games. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1005. As the voice spoke, the pupils of Elder Feng and the people from the Lai Shan family shrank. At that moment, a tall and slender figure walked out of the shattered square door. That person had a handsome face, as if the serendipity of the world had gathered on him. His black hair danced in the air, and his sacred constellation robe shone with a brilliant light. As he stood there, the otherworldly presence he exuded was enough to make all those who saw him pay attention to him. His eyes were bright, and his eyebrows were as sharp as swords. As he stood there, it was as if all the light in the area had dimmed. Only his figure became the focus of all the people's gazes. He seized the serendipity of the world and enjoyed the kismet of the universe. This was him, Dao Kong. Su Hui frowned and took a few steps back. The remaining 16 figures also instantly scattered. The 9 old men swiftly closed in and protected Dao Kong like guards. The concern on their faces was incredibly clear. This is a misunderstanding. I hope that the families of Black Ink Planet will not mind it. Dao Kong smiled faintly and wrapped his fist in his palm slightly towards Elder Feng and the others. A barely noticeable glint appeared in Elder Feng's eyes. His gaze moved along Dao Kong's body and landed on the room where Su Ming was. In that room, he saw Yu Rou, the 13 old men, and Su Ming, who was sitting cross-legged with a calm gaze. Fellow Taoist, Su had some secrets he wanted to talk to me about, which was why he came up with this plan and relocated me here. Now that we're done talking, we can't blame fellow Taoist Su for this. Dao Kong smiled faintly. Su Ming also smiled and nodded. A hint of apology appeared on his face, and he looked towards Elder Feng, the 9 old men beside Dao Kong, and Su Hui. Su Hui stared at Dao Kong. If it was not because she could sense that there was not a single change in Dao Kong's presence, she would have definitely suspected that something was wrong. However, even though the feeling in her soul was the same as before, she still had a feeling that something was off. However, she could not say what it was. With a glint in her eyes, her body quietly disappeared into the air. Since this is a misunderstanding, my fellow Taoists from True Morning Tao World, please return to your rooms. The auction is still going on, so I will take my leave now, Elder Feng said faintly after casting Dao Kong a profound glance. Please forgive my subordinate for offending you just now. Dao Kong was gentle and elegant. When he wrapped his fist in his palm, there was an apologetic look on his face. This suited his status and the impression he usually gave others. As he spoke, he turned around and cast Su Ming a glance. Once he nodded with a smile, he strode towards his room. The 9 old men cast hostile looks at Lai Shan family, then left behind Dao Kong. When they left, Elder Feng frowned and cast a glance at Su Ming once again. After a moment of pensive silence, he turned around and led the members of the Lai Shan family away. As for Elder Yu, he had already disappeared into the air a while ago. At that moment, he could no longer be seen. The 13 old men in Su Ming's room had apathetic expressions on their faces. They would not think about anything related to Su Ming. In their minds, there was only execution. However, it was different for Yu Rou. She looked at Su Ming with a complicated expression. She had a vague guess in her heart, but this guess was slightly inconceivable. This shouldn't be possession, or else why would Dao Kong still be able to retain his intelligence? And why would Su Ming still have his own intelligence? Besides, judging by the looks of the people from Morning Dao sect, if they could immediately find this place, then it means that there is someone among them who has a close connection with Dao Kong. But once Dao Kong is possessed, then that connection will definitely be cut off. But judging by their expressions just now, it seems like that connection is still there. But if it's not possession, then what is it? As Yuro thought about it, a deep hint of wariness appeared in her eyes as she looked at Su Ming. She found him to be even more unfathomable. Let's go. There's no longer any need for us to stay here. Su Ming stood up and said flatly, then walked forward. Yuro followed behind him. As for the 13 old men, they bowed respectfully towards Su Ming before disappearing from their rooms to guard the auction. Prepare a chamber for me. I want to isolate myself, Su Ming said calmly once he walked out of the room. Behind him, Yuro lowered her head and voiced her obedience. After a moment, Su Ming sat down cross-legged in a chamber located deep underground in Blackwater City. It was quiet all around him. He had his eyes open, and his expression was relaxed. Not a hint of emotion could be seen on his face. He seemed to be waiting for something. When the time it takes for an incense stick to burn had passed, a faint breeze seemed to blow past the chamber, and Su Ming looked towards it. Right before his eyes, Elder Feng walked out of the wind and sat down cross-legged before Su Ming. Lord God of Berserkers, please give me an explanation, Elder Feng said hoarsely while looking at Su Ming. Su Ming did not speak. Instead, he lifted his right hand, and a freezing aura slowly appeared in the air above his right hand. Soon after, snowflakes manifested. This was not an illusion, but Su Ming's life matrix, the coldness of midwinter. The snowflakes appeared on Su Ming's palm and floated down his palm to the ground. Gradually, the area around him was covered in a layer of snow. Elder Feng, what did you see? Su Ming asked slowly. Snow. A light crease appeared between Elder Feng's brows. Su Ming clenched his right hand and caught the snowflakes that had floated out of the air. Once they landed on his palm, he let go of Elder Feng to reveal the snowflakes that had not melted. What is this? Snow, Elder Feng said flatly. Su Ming smiled and swung his right hand. Once he flung off the snowflakes on his palm, he seized the layer of snow that covered the area around him gently. What is this now? It's still snow. Elder Feng narrowed his eyes, as if he had understood something. I've already explained it to you. Su Ming swung his arm, and all the snowflakes around him disappeared in an instant. I'm going to isolate myself and head to Divine Essence Star Ocean. I don't know when we will meet again after this. Elder Feng, take care. Su Ming smiled and slowly closed his eyes. Elder Feng remained silent for a moment before he shook his head and smiled. He got up and bowed towards Su Ming before he turned around and left while shaking his head. He understood now. Su Ming had indeed given him an explanation just now. As for the specifics of his understanding, it would vary from person to person. While Su Ming was in isolation, the auction in the world outside was still going on. Dao Kong sat on a soft chair in his room with a cup of wine in his hand. He looked at the auction through the screen of light and took a sip of the wine. The 9 old men sat behind him with their eyes closed, hiding the white light that had shone when they had flown into a rage. The beautiful woman was no longer a Catwoman at that moment. Instead, she had turned into a frail woman, as if she was incredibly afraid of Dao Kong. She knelt down respectfully by the side, and with a pot of wine in her hand, she would occasionally pour more wine for Dao Kong. I need an explanation. Su Hui's dark voice came from the air. Oh, what explanation? When Dao Kong asked flatly, a faint glint appeared in his eyes, and he looked towards the woman beside him. Ever since she followed him into the room, she had immediately turned into this frail woman. That fear was not fake, but she was truly, incredibly terrified of Dao Kong. What happened after you were teleported out of the sacred starry robe? Su Hui's gloomy voice echoed in the room. Fellow Taoist Su of Black Ink Planet had a trade he wanted to make with me, but it was not convenient for him to come to me directly, which was why he used this method, Dao Kong said slowly. But the moment he said those words, he noticed the woman by his side freeze and lift her head to cast him a surprised look. In fact, some of the 9 old men behind him also lifted their chins slightly. Ripples immediately appeared in the air before him, and Su Hui took a step forward. She glared at Dao Kong, and hints of murderous aura, as well as a strange look shone in her eyes. Dao Kong closed his eyes slightly and said flatly, only by using this method can he have a secret discussion with me. Oh, what secret discussion? Su Hui asked again. What secret discussion? Dao Kong lifted his head slightly, and a smile appeared on his face. He loosened his grip on the cup, and it immediately fell to the ground. However, before it could land on the ground, the woman immediately stretched out her hand to catch it. When he saw this, Dao Kong's smile grew wider. His right hand landed on the woman's face, and when he stroked it gently, the woman lowered her head. The surprise that had appeared on her face just moments ago disappeared, and it was replaced by obedience. Among the 9 old men behind him, the ones who had raised their heads also lowered their heads when they saw this scene. In fact, even Su Hui's eyes focused. Her expression remained the same, but some of the suspicions in her heart disappeared due to Dao Kong's actions. Why should I tell you? Dao Kong had the ghost of a smile on his lips, and there was a hint of coldness on his face as he looked towards Su Hui. Su Hui frowned. She hated Dao Kong's expression and tone, but it was precisely this expression and tone that caused most of the suspicions in her heart to disappear. She let out a cold harumph and fused into the air once again, disappearing. As Su Hui disappeared, Dao Kong's gaze fell on the screen of light. The ghost of a smile appeared on his face, but there was only calmness in the depths of his heart. He was not Dao Kong. He was Su Ming. Dao Kong's soul and all of his will have been possessed by Su Ming. However, he would need some time to digest Dao Kong's memories, and it would not take long. 1 month would be enough. At the instant he succeeded in possessing Dao Kong, Su Ming could clearly sense that Dao Kong's potential far surpassed his own. More importantly, he could vaguely sense the kismet on Dao Kong's body. This was the kismet from true morning Dao world. The existence of this kismet could allow this cultivation-based clone to have limitless potential. As Yiwang's kismet slowly disappears and he leaves, this cultivation-based clone of mine will have gathered together most of true morning Dao world's kismet. Because of that, with the nourishment and support from this kismet, this clone's potential will reach an incredibly powerful state. And I am a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect. Morning Dao sect. I wonder how the grudge between us will be torn apart once I become its only young master. Su Ming smiled. That smile was incredibly dazzling, and there was a strong, malicious air to it. When the woman by his side saw that smile, her heart shuddered. She quickly lowered her head and simply allowed Su Ming's right hand to brush past her face gently. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he said flatly, "This auction is boring. Notify the Galactic Warship that I will leave tomorrow." Requesting recommendation votes to be continued. If you like this work, I welcome you to come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1006. Should he use Dao Kong's identity to leave Black Ink Planet and return to the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds, keeping a lookout over the barren lands there, then return to true morning Dao world, or should he not be in a hurry to leave? Instead, he should head to Divine Essence Star Ocean. This was a choice. However, Su Ming chose the latter. He might want to immediately return to true morning Dao world, but his Ikang clone still needed a large amount of power of divine essence to continue becoming stronger so that he could devour the other 8 Ikang souls. The best place for him to obtain divine essence was naturally the mysterious and unfathomable divine essence Star Ocean. After all, that place was the place where countless gods fell asleep. This sort of place had the divine essence Su Ming needed. Also, when he sensed Lai Shanxiu's cry for help, Su Ming could not just ignore it. He chose to search for Lai Shanxiu's footsteps and do everything he could to try and find clues. If he could not do it in the end, then even if he left, Su Ming would have no regrets. However, this time, Su Ming did not intend to use his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole to go to Divine Essence Star Ocean. Instead, he chose to use his cultivation-based clone. The 3,000 fearless warriors, 9 old men in the later stage of World Plane Realm, the woman with astonishing speed, the cultivators in Lunar Culpa Realm from Phoenix Sect hiding in the area, and the dozen-something galactic warships. This power was much stronger than when Su Ming used his clone to practice the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. It could give him the power to protect himself in divine essence Star Ocean. Besides, with Su Ming's own power, it would be enough for him to explore more areas of divine essence Star Ocean and go to regions that few people could step into on normal days. With this thought in mind, once Su Ming walked out of the room in the auction hall, he brought the 9 old men with their eyes closed and the Catwoman back to the resting spot in true Morning Dao world. Su Ming chose a quiet room there and chased away the 9 old men and the Catwoman, then sat down and meditated quietly. It was quiet all around him. When Su Ming sat down, the divine essence runic symbols shone in his eyes. Immediately, the sacred constellation robe on his body swayed slightly, and runic symbols rose and fell. By the looks of it, it was as if these runic symbols existed on the sacred constellation robe, causing others to be unable to distinguish them. Soon after, the power of Abyss erupted from the sacred constellation robe, with Su Ming's body as the center. That power swept through the area and instantly covered the entire chamber. When anyone looked over, they could sense that there were countless ripples in the air around Su Ming, causing the chamber to look as if it had turned into an underwater world. The ripples surrounded Su Ming in layers like ripples in water. This was not the power of the sacred constellation robe, but the divine essence that existed in Su Ming's soul. He was just using the sacred constellation robe as a disguise. Su Ming had only possessed Dao Kong for a short period of time, and he still did not have the time to investigate the effects of the sacred constellation robe, but he could use it to hide the power of divine essence. A soft gasp of surprise immediately came from the side of the chamber, and Su Hui was forced out of the air. Her expression changed, and shock appeared in her eyes as she stared at the sacred constellation robe on Su Ming's body. This was the first time she had seen Morning Dao Sect's sacred constellation robe having such a concealing art. However, she was only shocked. After all, even if she was a member of Phoenix Sect, she would not be able to fully understand the mysteries of the sacred constellation robe. In her eyes, this was definitely a protective art activated by a senior in Morning Dao Sect out of love for Dao Kong. We're alone in this chamber. Could it be that you intend to dual cultivate with me here? If that's the case, then I will welcome you with open arms, Su Ming said in a lackadaisical manner. There was a malicious air to his words, along with a hint of frivolity. Su Hui let out a cold harumph. Disgust appeared on her face, as usual. The only person who could say such words was Dao Kong, who annoyed her. His words made most of the suspicions in her heart disappear, and there was not much of them left. After all, the connection in her soul was still the same. As she let out a cold harumph, Su Hui disappeared once again. She might as well leave the chamber. Once she left, the ripples continued spreading out in the chamber. When the time it takes for an incense stick to burn past, the lackadaisical look on Su Ming's face disappeared, replaced by calmness. He waited for a moment, then lifted his right hand and pushed his palm against the ground before him. Immediately, light spread out from the edges of his palm. With a calm expression on his face, Su Ming lifted his right hand slowly, and a relocation rune appeared before him. That rune had existed in the chamber since a long time ago. More accurately speaking, it had existed before the people from Morning Dao Sect came to Black Ink Planet. However, it had been hidden so well that even Su Hui had not noticed it. Almost at the same time the rune shone before Su Ming. Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole slowly opened his eyes in another chamber in another region of Blackwater City. As he did so, the light from the rune spread out from his body. That light grew stronger, and in an instant, it completely submerged Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. After the span of 3 breaths, Su Ming's clone disappeared without a trace. At the same time, in the chamber where Su Ming's cultivation-based clone was located, the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole appeared in the rune. It swiftly gained corporeal form and took a step forward. Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole did not stop. Instead, He took another step forward and crashed into Su Ming's cultivation base clone sitting in the chamber. As if they had fused together, they overlapped with each other. When anyone looked over, they could clearly see that the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole seemed to exist in a different dimension from the cultivation base clone. He seemed to have stepped on the cultivation base clone's body, and once he turned around, he sat down cross-legged. The spot where he sat was the spot where Su Ming's cultivation base clone was sitting. During that instant, the two completely overlapped with each other. Once the two clones overlapped with each other, distortions immediately appeared. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, the distortions gradually calmed down. When everything in the chamber returned to its original state, the overlapping shadows on Su Ming's body disappeared. He still had Dao Kong's appearance, but at that moment, if he brought out his full combat prowess, he would be much stronger than Dao Kong. Su Ming smiled faintly. He lifted his right hand and swung it at the ground. Immediately, the relocation rune disappeared. It also shattered inch by inch until it was completely wiped off. Once I return to the galactic warship and head to Divine Essence Star Ocean, I will increase the cultivation base of this cultivation base clone to the highest level of power I can bear, Su Ming mumbled. A brilliant light shone in his eyes. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. The increase in his level of cultivation was his foundation. This was a true divine ability that was even stronger than the power of his physical body. God Ascension Nectar. It's finally time for me to use it. Su Ming touched his storage bag. As the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole fused with him, the number of storage bags on his person had increased by quite a large amount. As for Dao Kong's storage bag, Su Ming only needed to scan it with his Atman to see quite a large amount of good stuff. However, time was limited, and there were plenty of things he had to do. He was prepared to check them one by one once he returned to the galactic warship. He believed that it would be an incredibly great harvest. It's a pity that not even the Lai Shan family could find any clues regarding the bald crane's physical body. They searched through everything, but they didn't manage to find anything. Su Ming pondered over this for a moment, then closed his eyes and immersed himself in Dao Kong's memories. He wanted to master all of Dao Kong's memories and habits as soon as possible. Only then could he slowly change and turn into Su Ming without anyone noticing. The night passed by quickly. When the next morning arrived, Su Ming opened his eyes. A strange light shone briefly in his eyes, and he stood up. With a swing of his arm, the door to the chamber opened slowly. The 9 old men with their eyes closed, and the Catwoman stood respectfully outside the chamber. Su Ming did not say a single word. Once he walked out of the chamber, he turned into a long arc. The 9 old men and the Catwoman also turned into long arcs behind him and charged into the sky. In Black Ink Planet Sky, Su Ming lifted his right hand. The ring on his index finger was illuminated by sunlight, and it immediately shone with a dazzling light. With a single thought from Su Ming, the light from the ring became even stronger, as if it wanted to compete with the sun for its brilliance. At the same time, booming sounds reverberated in the air, and in the blink of an eye, illusory figures appeared all around Su Ming. There were 3,000 of them, no more, no less. Naturally, they were the Morning Dao Sect's fearless warriors given to Dao Kong by Morning Dao Sect. Greetings, young master. The 3,000 cultivators spoke in the same voice and did the same action. Their voices fused together and turned into a wave of sound that surged into the sky. It stirred up a powerful presence, one that gave them the murderous aura that would make them dare to fight even in the face of an old monster in Solar Culpa Realm. As he looked at the 3,000 cultivators before him, a smile appeared on Su Ming's face. Young master, the galactic ship has been activated. You can leave at any time. Young master, when will you board the ship? The beautiful woman beside Su Ming asked respectfully in a low voice. Wait, come with me to Worldly Star City. When Su Ming spoke, he took a step in the direction of Worldly Star City. The 9 old men immediately followed behind him, and the 3,000 cultivators turned into 3,000 long arcs that charged forward. If anyone on the ground lifted their heads to look at this scene, they would feel as if there were thousands of shooting stars slicing through the sky. Their presence was like a tidal wave, and they stirred up ripples in the world that could be seen from the distance. As they charged forward, worldly Star City could be seen in the distance before long. A faint smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. He could already sense the bald crane and the abyss dragon's presences in worldly Star City. In fact, as they got closer and arrived in the sky above worldly Star City, he saw two men surrounding a cultivator in a corner of the city. They were whispering something to each other, and the vulgar-looking man that was the bald crane had one hand in his bosom to bring out a corner of a picture book, as if he was trying to catch the cultivator's attention. Do you see it, fellow Taoist? Do you want to know the secrets of Black Ink Planet? Do you want to know what sort of organization Black Ink Tao is? Haha, I have all of them here. You're not interested? Then are you interested in the private life of Progenitor You? Do you want to know the true identity of the dual fiends, the crane and the black? Are you willing to take a look at the secret picture book of the mysterious beauty in the past? I also have the name list of all the illegitimate children of the Hua family, as well as the truth of how Progenitor Mo family endured the pain of castrating himself to increase his level of cultivation in the past. In fact, I also have the ironclad proof that the members of the Lishan family do not like the opposite sex and only love the same sex. 300 years ago, why did nearly 200 old women from 80 families cry together? 1,000 years ago, why did all the female ferocious beasts in Black Ink Planet wail for 3 years? 3,000 years ago, why did all the male ferocious beasts in Black Ink Planet roar in anger for 10 years? All of these for only 10,000 crystals. Brother, 10,000 crystals, and this book will belong to you. You're lucky. Today is the 300th anniversary of my opening. I'll give you a discount for the first 10 buyers. It's not 10,000 crystals, it's not 8,000 crystals, and it's not even 5,000 crystals. Instead, it was 999 crystals. Fellow Taoist, you only need 999 crystals, and you can take away all of Black Ink Planet's secrets. The bald crane was so excited that its spit was flying everywhere, stunning the cultivator. Su Ming sighed in midair and lifted his right hand to point at the bald crane and the abyss dragon who was helping him. Capture the two of them and take them away. The bald crane only needs 999 crystals, and Ear also needs recommendation votes and monthly votes. Just 999 crystals, and Ear will go with you. If you like this work, I welcome you to give me recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1007. As Su Ming spoke, the expressions of the 9 old men beside him remained as calm as ever. Clearly, the power of the man who was the bald crane and the abyss dragon was unable to attract their attention. The expressions of the 3,000 fearless warriors behind Su Ming did not change much, but a monstrous presence erupted from their bodies in an instant, turning into a mighty pressure that swiftly enveloped the entire worldly star planet, especially the bald crane and the man who was the abyss dragon. At the same time, a glint appeared in the eyes of the Catwoman beside Su Ming. Her ears instantly became much sharper, and with a single move, with a speed that made even Su Ming's pupils shrink slightly, she instantly appeared beside the bald crane and the man who was the abyss dragon. Do not harm them. Capture them alive. Su Ming swung his arm, turned around, and walked towards the sky. The 9 old men followed behind him, and the 3,000 fearless warriors surrounded him. The bald crane was momentarily stunned. It had been too engrossed in the battle just now, which was why it did not notice that there were so many people in the sky. At that moment, it was shocked by the mighty pressure, and when it lifted its head, it immediately let out a shrill cry. Su Ming did not turn his head back to look. The bald crane should have been taught a lesson, which was why with an indifferent expression, he charged into the sky while surrounded by the crowd. When he flew out of the highest layer of wind in Black Ink Planet, he stood in the galaxy and saw the 13 gigantic warships. From a distance, the 13 warships looked ferocious. They were entirely black, and there was a ghastly air about them, especially at the tip of their bows. There was a murderous aura coming from them. That murderous aura was gathered together and did not spread out, but once it spread out, it would form a power that could destroy the world. Each of True Morning Tao World's galactic warships was incredibly valuable. They were controlled by Morning Tao sect, and they were gigantic enchanted vessels that could stand on equal footing with True Sacredine World's ancient bronze swords. Almost at the instant Su Ming saw the 13 warships, hundreds of people flew out from them. There were men and women among them, and all of them had respectful expressions on their faces. They wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards Su Ming. "Welcome back, young master." Su Ming smiled faintly. He did not speak, but instead walked forward. When he got close to the warships, he swept his gaze past them before his eyes landed on the largest of the 13 warships, and he stepped forward. The moment he stepped onto the battleship, the 9 old men followed him. As for the 3,000 death warriors, they scattered and entered the other battleships. Su Ming closed his eyes on the warship that originally belonged to Dao Kong. He spread his Atman to envelop the warship, and after some time, he gained a direct understanding of the warship based on Dao Kong's memories. At that moment, shrill roars came from the distance and grew closer. In the blink of an eye, those shrill cries reverberated in Su Ming's warship. "Damn it! Don't you know who you've captured? Let me tell you, your Grandpa Crane isn't someone to be trifled with. If you dare to capture me, you're done for. Just you wait. Su Brat will come and save me." Su Ming opened his eyes and saw the beautiful woman holding a man in each of her hands. When she arrived at the warship, she let go of the bald crane and the abyss dragon. She stood beside Su Ming and lowered her head with respect on her face. "I'm telling you, your Grandpa Crane is very powerful. Why you? Just you wait. Before long, you'll pay the price." The bald crane bared its teeth and claws as it spoke fiercely, but Su Ming, who was familiar with it, could see the fear in its heart. The abyss dragon remained silent by the side. "If you know what's good for you, then hurry up and send us back to Blacking Planet, or else, even if you're from True Morning Tao World, you won't be able to withstand little brat Su's wrath." The bald crane screeched again. It was incredibly afraid at that moment, especially when it saw the aloof expressions on the cultivators around it. No matter how it threatened them, they would remain unmoved, and its heart trembled. It would occasionally size up the handsome young man's face before it, and a thought raced in its head. "Damn it, he's not among the people I've deceived over the years. Why does he want to capture me? Could it be that he's little brat Su's enemy? Ah, Su Ming, oh Su Ming, you've really caused my death." The bald crane lacked confidence, but it still screeched at the top of its lungs and put on an act as if it had a powerful background. Su Ming smiled faintly and watched the bald crane continue making a ruckus. He lifted his right hand slowly and swiped his storage bag gently. Immediately, a crystal appeared in his hand. He threw it on the ground. The clear sound of the crystal crashing against the ground was barely audible amid the bald crane's screeches. But almost at the instant the sound traveled into the air, the bald crane's cries came to an abrupt halt. Its eyes widened, and it almost instinctively pounced on the crystal. It was so quick that it instantly grabbed the crystal. It even brought it to the corner of its mouth and bit into it. Excitement appeared on its face. "I lack 2 followers by my side," Su Ming said flatly. The bald crane immediately put away the crystal, then looked at Su Ming before it patted its chest and said loudly, "I am willing to be your follower. I'm willing to be your follower, but I want 1 crystal every day." As he spoke, he even kicked the abyss dragon before looking at Su Ming. "At it, and you'll get 2 crystals every day." Bald crane. The man who was the abyss dragon glared at the bald crane. Just as it was about to speak, it was kicked twice in succession by the bald crane. It was momentarily stunned. Being kicked twice was a signal that they had agreed on. The abyss dragon let out a harumph and no longer spoke. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he said flatly, "All right, you can leave." Notify the other warships that they are heading to Divine Essence Star Ocean. He then sat down cross-legged. Su Ming's order was a supreme, mighty pressure on the 13 warships. As his words traveled outwards, the 13 warships let out whistling sounds after a moment and changed their direction. In an instant, they shot past Black Ink Planet and charged towards Divine Essence Star Ocean, which was located behind Black Ink Planet. Even Su Hui did not ask about it after a moment of hesitation. She did not know Dao Kong's mission in Black Ink Planet and thought that heading to Divine Essence Star Ocean was also one of his missions. The 13 warships left the galaxy together and stirred up layers of ripples. Wherever they went, the galaxy would ripple like the surface of a sea. Su Ming sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal before pushing it against the ground. Immediately, an illusory screen of light appeared around him. That screen of light spread outwards and fused with the area above him to form an empty space with Su Ming as its center. This was an art that the galactic warships possessed. They could form a chamber that others would find difficult to enter. Those who could do this had to be the masters of the warships, and since Su Ming had possessed Dao Kong, he naturally possessed this ability as well. He was the only one in the chamber. All the others had been chased away. Even Su Hui would not be able to step into the chamber without making a sound on the warship. This was a region that was absolutely safe for Su Ming. With the bald crane's intelligence, it should have realized what was going on. There's no need for me to remind it. When Su Ming opened and closed his eyes, a brilliant light shone in them. Right now, the most important thing is to increase my level of cultivation. A hint of expectation appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He sucked in a deep breath, and at the instant he slowly closed his eyes, he immediately circulated his cultivation base. Once he possessed Dao Kong, Dao Kong's original level of cultivation in his body had become empty. It no longer possessed corporeal form, and it had dissipated along with Dao Kong's death. In truth, Su Ming's level of cultivation was still at the peak of Heaven Cultivation Realm. However, with Dao Kong's potential and the accumulation of power Su Ming had accumulated over the years, he was confident that he could easily reach World Plane Realm. Almost at the instant Su Ming closed his eyes, his cultivation base circulated with a bang, and as a Kang clone in Western Ring Nebula's foreign land opened his eyes. Waves of divine essence appeared on his Akang clone, as if there was a connection between him and his cultivation-based clone, even if there was an endless distance between them. If I want to reach World Plane Realm, I will need to obtain the acknowledgement of World, and from there, I will be able to borrow the power of that World Plane to allow my own level of cultivation to reach that realm. I don't have the chance to have a world acknowledge me, but I don't need other worlds' acknowledgement either. I have my own Akang world. Previously, due to the limitations of my potential, I was unable to become a cultivator in World Plane Realm for a long time, but now, the limitations of my potential are no longer there. I want to step into World Plane Realm. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He formed a seal with his hands and placed them on his knees. Once he sucked in a deep breath, he slowly closed his eyes. At the instant he did so, the Akang world where his Akang clone was instantly started boiling. As the power of divine essence filled the world, Su Ming's soul had already branded itself in the place. Almost in an instant, a thick wave of power of world planes spread out from the 100,000 worlds within the divine essence. The power of world planes contained the brand of Su Ming's soul. As it boiled, it stirred up the presence of Su Ming's cultivation-based clone, causing his level of cultivation to increase exponentially with a bang while he closed his eyes in the battleship. Boom! A violent bang reverberated in Su Ming's mind. It was the impact of a cultivator in Heaven Cultivation Realm rushing towards World Plane Realm. It was just one impact, but Su Ming's body shuddered. His level of cultivation instantly increased exponentially, and from the peak of Heaven Cultivation Realm, he swiftly moved into the initial stage of World Plane Realm. Once he entered World Plane Realm, Su Ming's Atman instantly grew by 100 times. A feeling as if he had been enlightened and that he could fuse with the entire galaxy instantly rose in his heart. This sort of feeling was something he had never felt before. Right then, it appeared for the first time, and he could not help but immerse himself in it. I've finally reached a breakthrough in my level of cultivation and stepped into world plane realm, Su Ming mumbled. His physical body might be incredibly strong, and his Akang clone might be far stronger than his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. But due to his potential, his level of cultivation was far from being able to compare. Yet now, he could sense world plane realm. In fact, he could even sense that as his level of cultivation increased, his soul seemed to be different from before. I should be able to continue improving. Su Ming opened his eyes slightly. The profound look in his eyes gave him a feeling as if the universe was contained within them. He mumbled softly and circulated his cultivation base once again, stirring up his Akang clone's expanse cosmos. As his cultivation base circulated in his body, he charged towards the middle stage of world plane realm. At that moment, Su Ming could only be described with these 4 words. He had accumulated a lot of experience before him. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1008. Due to the screen of light covering the battleship, the impact from Su Ming's cultivation base blocked all the ripples from spreading out. Not a single hint of his presence spread out, making it impossible for anyone to know what had happened. Everything was normal. The bald crane and the abyss dragon swaggered down the ship at that moment. The bald crane's eyes shone with a provocative look, and it would occasionally sweep its gaze past the cultivators sitting and meditating around it in an arrogant manner. Perhaps the bald crane was a little tired after doing this for a long period of time, but an hour later, it returned to its room on the battleship. There, the abyss dragon stared at the bald crane. It had far too many questions, and it wanted to wait for the bald crane's explanation. Just what is going on? The abyss dragon asked in a low voice. Why you? I'm impressed. You still don't understand? The bald crane yawned and cast a sideways glance at the abyss dragon before sighing. The man who was the abyss dragon frowned, but did not speak. It's such a simple matter. We met a rich man, and the bald crane, was valued by him. He used a large sum of money to invite me to become his follower, and you followed me to benefit from it. It's that simple. The bald crane blinked. Then what about Su Ming? The abyss dragon was momentarily stunned. After a moment of hesitation, he looked at the bald crane. Let's not bother about him. He's too stingy. Look at how good our new master is. He gave us crystals the moment we met him. If we follow him, our future will definitely be bright, and we'll be able to return to true Morning Dao world. Isn't that great? You'll also be able to see your young master sooner. The bald crane cackled. The abyss dragon hesitated again. It felt that this was not very good. All right, when have you ever suffered when you followed me? Stop thinking about it. Once we return to true Morning Dao world, I'll accompany you to the Emperor of Abyss World's expanse cosmos. At that time, don't forget the crystals you promised me. The bald crane yawned and crawled on the ground by the side. It had taken human form, but no matter how one looked at it, it still looked like a dead dog. The abyss dragon sighed and no longer spoke. Instead, it crawled to another corner, and it also looked like the big yellow dog. When the abyss dragon sighed, a barely noticeable glint shone in the bald crane's eyes. The abyss dragon of the abyss dragon's intelligence could not understand the thoughts in its head. There's no one else in this world besides Su Ming who would throw a crystal to me the first time he sees me. This person was able to possess even a Kang, and after he possessed it, none of a Kang's souls were able to recognize him. Possessing a mere cultivator would be a piece of cake for him. Besides, I didn't pay attention to his soul before, but once I took a closer look, if it wasn't Su Ming, who else could it be? I'm still the smart one. It's a pity that there are far too few smart cranes in the world. As the bald crane thought about it, a sentimental expression appeared on its face, as if it was looking down on all the other mountains. The 13 battleships sped through space. Days passed. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. They were already far away from Black Ink Planet. They were already about to enter the periphery of Divine Essence Star Ocean, and on their way, not a single force of power dared to harbor any ill will towards them. When cultivators saw them, they would immediately avoid them, not daring to offend them. In fact, some of the smaller planets and forces of power in the region between Black Ink Planet and the periphery of Divine Essence Star Ocean would let the 13 battleships pass through once they noticed them. If it were not for the 13 battleships, and if Su Ming was alone, then before he could even reach the periphery of Divine Essence Star Ocean, he would have been stopped more than once. In this place, killing others and snatching their treasures was a matter of course. There were countless cases of the weak being trampled upon by the strong. Without sufficient power, no one would dare to go to Divine Essence Star Ocean. Due to this law of survival, there were several rogue cultivators who acted like bandits in this region. They were watching the place with hostility, and they would swarm towards all prey that they believed they could snatch without any hesitation. However, none of these forces of power dared to offend the 13 awe-inspiring battleships. Su Ming did not know about any of this. During the dozen-something days, he had been immersed in increasing his level of cultivation. As he attempted to break through the bottlenecks again and again, he used the power of world planes in Akang's expanse cosmos to push his level of cultivation to the peak of the initial stage of world plane realm. With just one more step, he would be able to step into the middle stage of world plane realm. However, this step was not easy to take. Once he attempted to break through the bottlenecks several times, Su Ming knew that even with Dao Kong's potential, he would still need around 100 years before he could step into the middle stage of world plane realm. Dao Kong's level of cultivation might have already surpassed the middle stage of world plane realm, but Su Ming had seen in Dao Kong's memories that while it was related to his potential that he had stepped into the middle stage of world plane realm, the most important reason was because of a great ceremony known as Morning Dao Pilgrimage. Once a direct descendant reached a bottleneck in their level of cultivation, they would have a chance to go to Morning Dao Pilgrimage. They could only do it once, and there was a certain chance that they would be able to break through their bottleneck. However, the chances were largely related to their potential. Dao Kong had reached the middle stage of World Plane Realm during Morning Dao Pilgrimage before he came to the barren lands of Divine Essence. Once another attempt failed, Su Ming opened his eyes. A brilliant light shone in them, and after a moment of pensive silence, he patted his storage bag with his right hand. Immediately, a poisonous wasp appeared on his palm. That poisonous wasp flapped its wings lightly and lay down on Su Ming's palm. After being nourished for 1,000-something years, the poisonous wasp had become incredibly close to Su Ming, and it had also reached the point where he could extract the God Ascension nectar from its body. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath, and a hint of determination shone in his eyes. The 1,000-something years of nourishment allowed Su Ming to be certain that there was indeed God Ascension nectar in the poisonous wasp's body. However, it was very difficult to extract the nectar completely. It had already fused with the poisonous wasp, and the only way to extract it was to use its poison. The poisonous wasp's poison contained God Ascension nectar, and Su Ming needed to control the amount of the God Ascension nectar in its body. With a single thought, the poisonous wasp in Su Ming's hand disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already on Su Ming's chest, and the poisonous stinger on its tail turned into a freezing ray of light that stabbed into his body. If the poisonous wasp did this without sufficient nourishment and familiarity, then a large amount of poison would pour into Su Ming's body. At that time, what awaited Su Ming would no longer be a serendipity, but a crisis. Yet now, in Su Ming's divine sense, even though the poisonous wasp had stabbed its poisonous stinger into his body, it was still carefully controlling its poison. It was injecting the God Ascension nectar in its body bit by bit into Su Ming's body along with the poison. In just a moment, Su Ming's body turned purplish-black. The poisonous wasp quickly pulled out its poisonous stinger and flew around Su Ming. There seemed to be a hint of anxiety in its buzzing. Su Ming's face had also turned purplish-black at that moment. His body trembled. The poisonous wasp's poison had already covered his entire body as it circulated through his blood, but since he had controlled the amount, the poison would not take effect instantly. Instead, it was kept within a range Su Ming could withstand. He sucked in a deep breath and closed his eyes. Several days later, the purplish-black hue on Su Ming's body slowly faded away until it gathered on his right index finger, causing it to turn black. Su Ming opened his eyes, and he sliced his index finger with his fingernail. Immediately, black blood flowed out. When all the poisonous blood flowed out, there was no longer any poison in Su Ming's body. Instead, there was a hint of a golden substance that looked like honey in his blood. It was a long thread, but it did not fuse with his blood. That hint of golden substance was God Ascension nectar. More accurately speaking, the amount of it was only a tiny bit of the nectar in the poisonous wasp's body. However, it was precisely this tiny bit of nectar that allowed Su Ming to close his eyes again and circulate his cultivation base at full force while urging his qi to fuse with the poison. Thunder immediately roared in his head. The booming sounds replaced Su Ming's consciousness, and in an instant, a violent wave of power erupted from his body with loud, booming sounds. God Ascension nectar was a supreme treasure Su Ming had obtained from Death region. It was known as the God Ascension nectar, and it was said that this nectar could turn a mortal into a god. It might seem like an exaggeration, but the mere existence of such a legend was enough to prove just how shocking this item had been during the ancient era. It could be said that this God Ascension nectar had long since gone extinct in the universe. It was impossible to find even a single bit of it, but due to the serendipity of the universe, a poisonous wasp had left behind some nectar in its body. And that poisonous wasp had not died, but was being kept alive by Su Ming. This was a serendipity that belonged to Su Ming. In fact, if anyone else learned that Su Ming possessed God Ascension nectar, then perhaps even the four great true world would be plunged into a disaster to fight over the poisonous wasp. The God Ascension nectar was a supreme treasure that could make the ferocious beasts in the universe go mad. This was a wondrous item that should not exist in the universe. It was just a hint of it, but already made Su Ming feel as if his body was burning. It boiled under the booming sounds, and even his will instantly scattered. It was the same for his cultivation-based clone, and it was the same for his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. However, Su Ming's decaying clone remained clear-headed under the booming sounds, guiding Su Ming's soul to indirectly control his cultivation-based clone to continuously circulate his cultivation base to melt that hint of God Ascension nectar. Every single time Su Ming circulated his cultivation base once, the God Ascension nectar would melt a little, and his cultivation base would increase exponentially in the midst of the booming sounds. The bottleneck between the peak of the initial stage of World Plane Realm and the middle stage of World Plane Realm was broken with just 9 circulations of his cultivation base. Even as his cultivation base reached a breakthrough, Su Ming still could not gather his will together. The power of the God Ascension nectar in his body was simply too strong, and he even had the misconception that his body was about to explode. At the instant he absorbed the God Ascension nectar and circulated his cultivation base for the 10th time, the screen of light formed by the warship could not withstand the vast presence spreading out from Su Ming's body. With a bang, it shattered inch by inch. Once the screen of light shattered, all the cultivators on the warship instantly looked over. The hearts of the 9 old men trembled, and they swiftly rose to their feet. In fact, all 13 warships stopped at that moment. Young master, train. Warships, surround and protect him. The old man with the oldest face among the 9 old men immediately said in an awe-inspiring voice. It was also at that instant that the expressions of the 9 old men suddenly changed. They looked towards the dark galaxy in the distance. In fact, Su Hui also walked out of space by the side. She cast a solemn look at Su Ming before immediately looking into the distance. The space in the distance was filled with dead silence, but if anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that there was a ball of black fog that was swiftly swelling up in all directions. As it swelled up, faint sounds that sounded like the cries of babies could be heard. Those were the powerful, ferocious beasts in the periphery of divine essence star ocean that had been lured over by the god Ascension Nectar. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1009. When the screen of light shattered, Su Ming's meditating figure was revealed. The onlookers could clearly see that his body was completely red at that moment. Veins popped up on his skin, and he was trembling nonstop. His expression was distorted, as if he was enduring great pain. A thick fragrance spread out from Su Ming's trembling body. That fragrance was so thick that it swiftly spread out in all directions when the screen of light shattered. The ferocious beast with the cries of a baby in the distance had been attracted over when the screen of light shattered just then. To ferocious beasts, that fragrance was enough to stir up the madness in their ancient blood. And that was only for a short period of time. If the fragrance had spread out for a longer period of time, then even more ferocious beasts would have been stimulated by that fragrance, and ferocious expressions would appear on their faces. In fact, the cultivators on the 13 warships also smelled that fragrance. Their cultivation bases started circulating rapidly due to the stimulation, as if with each breath they took, their cultivation bases would increase slightly. This scene caused their hearts to tremble. It did not matter whether it was the 9 old men or Su Hui, who was hidden in space. All of them looked toward Su Ming. Their expressions might have been different, but at that moment, all of them were surprised and bewildered. Waves of tears in Star Ocean. The fog tumbled about in the distance. When the baby wailing spread in all directions, the 13 warships immediately shone with a dark light. The pupils of the Catwoman on Su Ming's warship shrank, and she immediately cried out anxiously. Her face was flushed red. The fragrance from Su Ming's body was slightly better to cultivators, but to ferocious beasts, it stimulated them even more. She could turn into a Catwoman, which was a state between a human and a ferocious beast. Because of that, Su Ming's presence was enough to throw her mind into chaos. At that moment, she bit down on her tongue to remain clear-headed. This beast is a strange spirit that lives in the periphery of divine essence star ocean, but it's very docile. Usually it won't attack anyone who passes by, but today, at the instant the Catwoman said those words, the cry of a baby traveled into their ears with a bang, and it was several times louder than before. That cry was piercing. When it came from the fog in the distance, a large amount of ripples stirred up in the galaxy, as if the cry had turned into a wave of sound that tumbled about in all directions. There were 12 warships protecting Su Ming's ship, and 3 of them were facing the waves of tears. Almost at the instant the piercing sound wave roared in the air, the 3 warships instantly tilted to the side and were forced backwards by the impact of the sound wave. The Catwoman's face was slightly pale when she immediately said, "Their voices are like waves, and their cries seem to have turned the galaxy into an ocean. As they tumble about, the sound of waves can drown out space. This is the waves of tears in the periphery of divine essence star ocean. Notify all of the battleships to use their most powerful divine abilities to kill that beast." One of the 9 old men said in a sinister voice, "Tell all of the battleships to use their most powerful divine abilities to kill that beast." "Elder, you can't. This beast doesn't live alone. It likes to live in groups. If we attack, we might attract other waves of tears beasts." At that time, the Catwoman hurriedly stopped them. "Go around it." Before the 9 old men could speak again, Su Hui's solemn voice came from the void. The moment she spoke, before Su Ming woke up, was the highest order from this group of people. Even the 9 old men chose to obey her. Immediately, the 13 warships moved forward slowly while protecting Su Ming, intending to circle around the region and avoid the waves of tears. However, At the instant the 13 warships were about to circle around the waves of tears, the piercing cries of a baby reverberated in the air once again. This time, the fog tumbling about in the distance swiftly spread outwards. From its previous 10,000 feet size, it grew to nearly 50,000 feet, and it was moving. Judging by the direction it was moving, it was heading towards where the 13 warships were. It was trying to stop the 13 battleships from leaving. That piercing wail stirred up ripples in the starry sky, as if it had the will of the wave of tears. It came from all directions like waves, stopping the 13 battleships from moving forward. You're just asking for death. The old man who had spoken previously might still have his eyes closed, but when his cold and sinister voice reverberated in the air, it spread through the 13 warships. Use your most powerful magical technique to kill this beast. Since the waves of tears' hostility was already clear, simply avoiding it would not solve the problem. That was why Su Hui did not stop the old man from speaking this time. Almost at the instant the old man's words spread through the 13 battleships, the dark light on all the battleships shone brightly. As the light shone dazzlingly, a vortex seemed to have appeared at the tips of the 13 battleships, and the dark light on each battleship was instantly sucked away. Boom! A loud bang that shook the sky, and Earth reverberated in the galaxy. 13 gigantic black pillars of light erupted from the 13 warships with an astonishing presence. The 13 pillars of light were like 13 sharp arrows that sliced through the galaxy and stirred up ripples that surged into the sky. They crashed into the waves of sound coming from the waves of tears' piercing cries. The 13 pillars of light sliced through space right before everyone's eyes and crashed into the continuously swelling fog. But like a stone falling into the sea, they were devoured by the fog. Not a single one of them managed to pierce through it. This scene landed in the eyes of the people from Morning Dao sect, but their expressions remained the same. There were not many changes in them. In fact, the 9 old men's lips curled up into cold sneers. Almost as soon as the smile appeared, a loud rumble that surpassed all the previous sounds suddenly erupted from within the fog. In the mid of that loud bang, the fog was torn to pieces from within. When it tumbled backwards, the entire mass of fog instantly disintegrated. Yet the instant it disintegrated, the cries of infants surged into the sky from within it. Ferocious beasts that looked like monkeys but were only about 100 feet tall surged out of the fog. The flock of waves of tears let out piercing howls without stop. Once they rushed out, fog would naturally gather around their bodies, causing their bodies to swiftly become indistinct. This scene brought great shock to the people from Morning Dao sect. However, that shock instantly turned into shudders, then numbness on their skins. This was because in the distant starry sky, another 10 huge balls of fog had appeared, and the cries of infants rose and fell. This was because in the distance, everyone saw a meteorite flying towards them at high speed. The meteor was dark red, and under it were countless waves of tears that were about 1,000 feet tall. As they roared, they charged forward as if they were carrying the meteor. In fact, there was a wave of tears that was 100,000 feet tall on the meteor. Its eyes were bloodshot, and greed could be seen in them. Its roars could drown out all the ferocious beasts. Activate your full speed and leave this place as soon as possible. Su Hui could not remain calm. Her voice immediately echoed in the air, and in an instant, the 13 warships let out loud, booming sounds and turned into 13 long arcs that charged into the distance. But behind them, the innumerable waves of tears were chasing after them with a howl. Damn monkeys! I hate monkeys the most. The bald crane popped its head out of its room and cast a glance at the endless number of waves of tears behind it. It immediately shuddered and started gnashing its teeth in exasperation. Monkeys are the most despicable. Why do I feel like I had a grudge against them in the past? I don't care. No matter what, monkeys are the most despicable. As it mumbled, it suddenly wrinkled its nose and looked towards Su Ming. Surprise appeared on its face. This fragrance is familiar. It's very familiar. I think I ate it in the past. While the bald crane was surprised, the abyss dragon beside it was already trembling. It circulated its cultivation base with excitement on its face. It could clearly sense that its shattered cultivation base was showing signs of healing under the stimulation of the fragrance. Booming sounds rang out in the world outside. There were no less than hundreds of thousands of waves of tears. Their numbers alone were enough to make all the cultivators' hearts tremble. Unless they were powerful warriors in Solar Culpa realm, it would be impossible for them to fight against them. In fact, perhaps even those in Solar Culpa realm would not be able to remain calm in the face of such a swarm of waves of tears. After all, the mighty pressure spreading out from the 100,000 feet waves of tears in the distance was enough to intimidate everything. Su Ming did not know about the danger the group faced at that moment. At that moment, he was circulating all his cultivation base and continuously melting the God Ascension nectar in his blood. He circulated it repeatedly, and every single time it stirred up a loud bang in his body, he would tremble even more. In fact, he felt as if even his soul was about to scatter. This was just a hint of the God Ascension nectar, but even if it was just a hint, Su Ming was already on the verge of being unable to withstand it. If his Akang clone had not been constantly protecting his soul and guiding his cultivation base to circulate and digest the God Ascension nectar while he was awake, his body would have exploded a long time ago due to the power of the God Ascension nectar. Serendipity had no form and was difficult to grasp. The God Ascension nectar had a great impact on all lives, but it was not the same for the poisonous wasp. It could stay in its body safely and fuse with its poison, but did not increase the wasp's combat abilities. In fact, it did not even have much of an effect on its poison. It was just like how its poison might be poison to other living beings, but to the wasp it would be fine. As Su Ming continued melting the God Ascension nectar, his level of cultivation increased exponentially. He broke through the bottleneck of the initial stage of World Plane Realm, and once he reached the middle stage of World Plane Realm, his level of cultivation increased once again, and he moved swiftly towards attaining completion in the middle stage of World Plane Realm. However, at that moment, he had only melted less than 3/10 of the God Ascension nectar in his body, but Su Ming could already clearly sense that he had already reached his limit. His soul could no longer continue, and it was even harder for his body to continue melting. His potential in his cultivation base was even showing signs of crumbling under the impact of the God Ascension nectar. God Ascension nectar, the power of divinity, ascension. The wisp of God Ascension nectar in my body right now is just a tiny bit of the God Ascension nectar in the poisonous wasp's body, but I can't completely melt it. I need to get used to it for a period of time before I can continue trying. Because of that, the parts of the God Ascension nectar in my body that I can't fuse with are no longer serendipities, but fatal poison. Su Ming opened his eyes with great difficulty. The divine essence runic symbols on his sacred constellation robe rose and fell. He was using the power of divine essence to suppress the God Ascension nectar. When he opened his eyes, he saw the endless swarm of waves of tears behind him, heard the piercing screeches that spread through the galaxy, and saw the solemn expressions on the faces of the people around him. At the same time, he also smelled the thick fragrance coming from his body. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 10:10. A focused glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and a brilliant light shone in his unfocused eyes. His expression immediately turned dark. With Su Ming's experience, he naturally understood why his battleship had caused the ferocious beasts in this galaxy to descend into madness. It was clearly due to the fragrance on his body. After all, that fragrance came from the God Ascension nectar. At that moment, only 3/10 of the God Ascension nectar in Su Ming's body had been melted. There was still 7/10 that his body could not withstand. If he kept it in his body, it would no longer be a serendipity, but a fatal poison. That was why he could no longer continue circulating his cultivation base to melt it. Even if it was a pity, he had to release it. With a dark expression on his face, a resolute look shone in Su Ming's eyes. I made a mistake this time. I originally thought that I could absorb just a small amount of God Ascension nectar from the poisonous wasp's body. But by the looks of it now, even if it's just a hint, I won't be able to melt it. Su Ming sighed in his heart. At that moment, the waves of tears that were chasing after the 13 warships let out piercing roars that grew louder. As the balls of fog charged forward, they fused with each other, causing the fog to become even larger. At the same time, their speed also increased by leaps and bounds. As more balls of fog fused together, the instant the fog swelled up, it became much faster. Like lightning, it surpassed the speed of the warships and charged towards them. There were 3 balls of fog that possessed this speed. Each of them was nearly 70,000 feet big. As they charged forward, they looked like dark clouds pressing down on the 13 warships. Activate the warship's divine abilities at full power and aim at the fog, Su Ming said in a dark voice while still sitting cross-legged. Su Hui, the fog to the right. 9 old frail darknesses. I will allow you to open your eyes slightly. The fog to the left. Su Ming did not speak these 3 sentences quickly. When he said them one by one, the 13 warships immediately changed their direction. The dark light at the bow of the warships reached a piercing degree, and with a bang, 13 pillars of light charged towards the fog formed by the waves of tears at the center. Soon after, Su Hui let out a cold harumph while she was hidden in the air. She might have been displeased with Su Ming's commanding tone, but she knew that this was not the time for her to refuse. A murderous look shone in her phoenix-like eyes, and she appeared beside the ball of fog coming towards her from the right. When she lifted her right hand, 16 figures that looked exactly like her immediately appeared behind her, and they pushed their palms forward simultaneously. At the instant, shocking booming sounds reverberated in the air. The 9 old men opened their eyes a slit beyond the fog to the left, revealing a white glare that was very obvious in the dark galaxy. The 9 of them roared at the same time, lifted their right hands, and pressed forward. Loud booming sounds rose and fell and reverberated in the air. Immediately, the 3 balls of fog formed by the waves of tears chasing after Su Ming were torn to shreds and tumbled backwards. At the same time, as the 3 balls of fog crumbled, nearly 10,000 waves of tears rushed out like a swarm of bees. Their piercing cries spread in all directions, and they swiftly pounced on Su Ming. Killing intent shone in Su Ming's eyes. When he saw the waves of tears staring at him with greed and madness in their eyes, it was enough to prove that his previous guess was correct. These ferocious beasts had been attracted by the fragrance of the God Ascension nectar on his body. Once his guess was proven, then Su Ming would not have much time left. If the God Ascension nectar could make these waves of tears descend into madness, then it would definitely be able to make other ferocious beasts descend into madness as well. However, this region was where the waves of tears were, which was why there were no other ferocious beasts around. However, if they delayed for too long, the fragrance of the God Ascension nectar would continue spreading outwards, and more ferocious beasts would definitely be attracted to this place. At that time, Su Ming and his group would all die. Move forward at full speed. Everyone, hear my orders. Do not leave the warships. Stay on the warships and fight against these ferocious beasts, Su Ming said in a low voice. His eyes sparkled. He had already noticed some clues about the waves of tears when he had been paying attention to them just now. That fog was their protection, and it was incredibly strong. It could even withstand a full-powered strike from those in Lunar Culpa realm. Only by breaking that fog could he truly attack these waves of tears, and he needed time to gather that fog again. Without the fog's protection, these waves of tears' offensive abilities were only equivalent to those in Earth Cultivation realm. However, there were too many of them, which was why Su Ming could not kill them quickly. However, the strongest power of the 13 warships, the 13 pillars of light, also needed time to be activated. Because of that, Su Ming had to make sure that he had the time difference. However, not all of these waves of tears were equivalent to those in Earth Cultivation realm. Some of them were 700 to 800 feet tall, and they could bring out the power of those in Heaven Cultivation Realm. There were also some that were more than 1,000 feet tall. Their offensive abilities could rival those in the initial stage of World Plane Realm, and there were quite a few of them. This was because they were in Divine Essence Star Ocean, or else it would be difficult for them to see such a large group of ferocious beasts with shocking levels of cultivation in the outside world. In fact, Su Ming could even see the waves of tears that were 10,000 feet tall in the distance. The mighty pressure spreading out from their bodies told him that they were in the middle stage of World Plane Realm. The most shocking thing was the 100,000 feet tall wave of tears sitting on the meteor in the distance. The creature's eyes shone with a red light, and there was wisdom within them. The mighty pressure spreading out from its body was the might of heaven that could only be created by an old monster in Solar Culpa Realm. Its fur was fiery red, and it was clearly different from the other waves of tears. Its relaxed expression gave others the feeling that it was facing a cultivator. Around this creature were 4 waves of tears that were 80,000-something feet tall. These 4 beasts were clearly much older, but based on their presences, they were at the peak of the later stage of World Plane Realm. These 5 waves of tears were enough to intimidate most of the cultivators in the universe. From this alone, it could be seen that there was a reason why Divine Essence Star Ocean was known as the Forbidden Grounds in all universes. And this was just the area near the periphery of Divine Essence Star Ocean. They had not even stepped into the periphery. Once they did, there might be more swarms of beasts like this, and there would also be the mysterious and unfathomable alien tribes. These tribes had lived in Divine Essence Star Ocean for countless years and could coexist with the abnormal beasts without being destroyed. There was definitely something terrifying about them. At that moment, Su Ming truly sensed the mysteriousness and strength of Divine Essence Star Ocean. The swarm of waves of tears this time had also given him a strong impression of Divine Essence Star Ocean. Su Ming's expression was dark. He knew that he had been too reckless this time. As he sighed in his heart, killing intent shone in his eyes as he faced the waves of tears pouncing on him. Shrill roars and the booming sounds of divine abilities immediately reverberated in the galaxy. There were around 1,000 waves of tears on each of the 13 warships, and they were engaged in a frenzied battle against hundreds of cultivators. These ferocious beasts had gone mad and wanted to kill every single cultivator regardless of the cost. In fact, Su Ming saw that once some cultivators died, a swarm of waves of tears would immediately pounce on them and tear at their flesh, as if they wanted to find something in their flesh. When Su Ming saw this, he instantly understood that the fragrance of the god Ascension nectar spreading out from his body must have fused into the bodies of the cultivators around him once they smelled it, but they could not immediately dissolve it, which was why there was still a remnant of it left, and this remnant was the source of the waves of tears madness. The warship he was on had the fewest number of waves of tears because it was protected by the other warships. If they wanted to enter, they would have to destroy the warships at the periphery. The battle instantly reached its most intense state. A large number of waves of tears died, but their numbers were endless. In fact, there were 4 more balls of fog that were 70,000-something feet big charging towards them from a distance. There were hundreds of waves of tears that were 1,000-something feet big, dozens of waves of tears that were 10,000-something feet big, and even a gigantic wave of tears that was about 50,000-something feet big and had a mighty pressure equivalent to those in the later stage of World Plane Realm. All of them were charging forward, roaring as they closed in. "Young Master, we are in a life and death crisis right now. Please immediately activate the warship and leave. We are willing to give up our lives to buy time for you. Young Master, please leave." Voices came one after another from the warships around them. They were the cultivators and fearless warriors of Morning Dao Sect. They were willing to give up their lives for Su Ming. In fact, the value of their existence was to protect the direct descendants of Morning Dao Sect. "Young Master." The 9 old men beside Su Ming also hesitated for a moment before they looked towards him. The Catwoman was silent as she waited for Su Ming's choice by the side. With her understanding of Dao Kong, she knew that he would definitely choose to leave. As for herself, she might be taken away, but if he ran into a crisis he could not solve, then sacrificing herself would be a foregone conclusion. Su Hui cast a cold glance at Su Ming and let out a cold harumph in her heart. With how hypocritical he was, he would definitely pretend not to leave, but in truth, if the situation became slightly more dangerous, he would choose to escape with some people. The sounds of battle reverberated in the air, and the whistling sounds drew closer. The warship might be very fast, but there were a large number of waves of tears fighting against the cultivators from Morning Dao sect, causing the enchanted vessel's speed to become increasingly slower. "Why should I leave?" Su Ming asked flatly. When he said those words, Su Hui immediately laughed coldly, and the disdain and disgust on her face grew. "9 old men, you don't have to protect me. Spread out and fight against the enemies. Su Hui, if you have the time to laugh coldly, then one of my subordinates will be injured. And you, change into your fastest speed, or else what's the point of keeping you around?" Su Ming swept his gaze across the area. The 9 old men lowered their heads, and with a single move, they swiftly spread out to different warships to fight against the waves of tears. Su Hui continued laughing coldly, but she did not refuse and joined the fight against the waves of tears. As for the Catwoman, she lowered her head and voiced her obedience. When she lifted her head, her ears immediately turned sharp, and with a single move, she disappeared without a trace. She was so fast that she swam past the 12 warships at the perimeter. Wherever she went, the blood of the waves of tears would spill everywhere, and shrill screams of pain would echo non-stop in the air. Su Ming got up from his seated position. At the instant a glint appeared in his eyes. The totem of the Duke of Crimson Flame manifested on his right arm. "Duke of Crimson Flame, shift me." At the instant Su Ming sent out his divine thought, his body disappeared. When he reappeared, he was right beside the 4 balls of fog formed by the waves of tears in the distance. His shift immediately stirred up shock and anxiety among the cultivators from Morning Dao sect, especially the 9 old men. Their hearts trembled, and even Su Hui was clearly stunned. She had not expected that Dao Kong would truly not want to escape, but would instead fight against the waves of tears personally. "I will definitely not leave and ignore the trouble I caused." Killing intent shone in Su Ming's eyes. Immediately, a large amount of the fragrance from the God Ascension nectar spread out from his body, causing the waves of tears to become even more frenzied. In fact, quite a number of the waves of tears on the warships turned around and charged towards Su Ming with piercing roars. Su Ming lifted his right hand. The reason why the fragrance from the God Ascension nectar was so thick was because he had given up on melting the God Ascension nectar when he circulated his cultivation base. Instead, he had used the simplest method to force it out of his body through his cultivation base, so that he could bring forth a storm that could wash the universe in blood. The power of the God Ascension nectar was a serendipity, but similarly, if it was ignited, then it would also bring forth a bloodbath. Finally, it was time for a big push. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation votes. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.